Chapter 1605. 2 months later, in a secluded Ghost God Valley, a little fairy girl walked out. She wrinkled her nose and looked back, only to see flames soaring into the sky. Many figures were struggling inside, but soon lost their strength and fell to the ground, turning into ashes. Don't blame me. You asked for it. So, the saying, the evils you bring upon yourself are the hardest to bear. It makes sense, Li Ruhua said with a smile, looking extremely calm. Although she couldn't take the initiative to attack, before entering this realm, Li Mu gave her some authority to use it within a certain range. She was the rule. Since the people of the Ghost God Valley wanted to break the rules, they were naturally attacked by the rules and ended up like this. The heavenly fire descended and burned everything. Of course, these people of the Ghost God Valley wouldn't die in vain. They would be sacrificed by Li Ruhua to make a deal with the bigger rules of this world. For example, completely erasing the traces she left in this world. Of course, this process would be carried out bit by bit in the next 10 years or even decades. It would be enough for the creatures in this world to not notice it. Even for some extremely powerful existences, this was the limitation of different dimensions and horizons. Even though everything in the Nang country and Huangliang country had reached the Dao integration stage and could be regarded as part of the world, they were still different. Li Ruhua withdrew her gaze and continued to walk out. As she walked, she thought, so much time has passed. It should be about time, right? What she needed to do now was to wait patiently for the detection to arrive. After confirming that Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin had been killed, she would leave directly. Cloud and Mist Valley. 2 months had passed, but there was still no news from his master and junior sister, which made Ning Chongqing a little worried. But compared to that, what worried the eldest senior brother in the valley even more was that his junior brother seemed to have changed into a different person during this period of time. Although he was still silent, sometimes his junior brother looked at him from behind, which made him feel a chill down his spine. He always felt that there were many things hidden in his junior brother's eyes. Ning Chongqing tried to ask, but his junior brother always shook his head and refused to answer. Later, Ning Chongqing found that his junior brother was carving bamboo slips in private and writing a lot of things on them. He didn't intend to peek at them. After all, they belonged to his junior brother. However, the bamboo slips were placed randomly and sometimes fell on his table. Occasionally glancing at it, Ning Chongqing found that what his junior brother had carved on the bamboo slips was actually a person's life. It was a story similar to a biography. After reading a few paragraphs, he found it interesting and took the initiative to mention it to his junior brother. If senior martial brother wants to read it, feel free to flip through it. Shirko's tone was calm, his eyes deep. Ning Chongqing felt that something was wrong, but for some reason, the stories engraved on the bamboo slips had a strong attraction to him. After hesitating for a while, he nodded and said, "Then I'll take a look. I'll just check it out for my junior brother." The story was very long. It was about a foreign country called the Western Wilderness. One day, a man named Ning Qin came to the country. Ning Chongqing was engrossed in the story. Sometimes, when he looked up after a long time, his eyes would subconsciously reveal a sense of confusion. And every time this happened, Shirko would quietly look at Ning Chongqing under the tree, outside the window, by the stream, in the fog. His shadow could be seen everywhere. More and more bamboo slips appeared. Ning Chongqing was completely engrossed, until one night, when the skies above his head were particularly dark and not a single star appeared. He put down the last bamboo slip. It was about Marquis Loyal Marshal Ning Qin. When he led his army back to the border, he encountered a lucky chance along the way. His soul entered a mystic realm, and his life began anew. "Senior apprentice brother, have you finished reading?" Shirko calmly said. Across from him, Ning Chongqing was in a trance. After several breaths of time, he nodded. His eyes were sometimes clear and sometimes confused. "Junior apprentice brother, I always feel that the person in your story is very familiar with me. There is even a feeling that I am him and he is me." Shirko was silent for a moment. He slowly said, "Senior apprentice brother's feeling is correct. You are indeed Marquis Loyal Marshal, the Ning Qin in the story." This is because when he led his army back to the border army camp, the lucky chance he encountered was the descent of Nank, the dream of golden millet. That's right, it is the Nank Nation. The golden millet nation is where you and I are now. Ning Chongging's eyes widened. He was shocked and in disbelief. But soon, a pained expression appeared on his face. He couldn't help but hold his head in his hands, mumbling to himself, I am Ning Qin. I am Marquis Loyal Marshal. No, my name is Ning Chongging. I am a descendant of a Ning family of the Golden Millet Nation. But who is Ning Qin? Why do I feel so familiar? Who am I? Who am I? Ning Chongging's pain increased. He gasped for breath in great gulps. Shirko suddenly said, Senior apprentice brother, to be woken up from a dream by someone is indeed a very uncomfortable matter. But please believe me, your current experience is already very good. At the very least, it is much better than what I experienced in the past. He reached out and patted Ning Chongging's shoulder. Sleep, sleep, and everything will be over. Ning Chongging struggled to open his eyes. There was some anxiety and fear in them, but he couldn't control his body. He nodded at Shirko and quickly fell asleep. His eyebrows were still tightly furrowed, and his body was constantly tense and relaxed. It was clear that even in his dream, it wasn't easy. After waiting for a moment, Shirko took out a saber from his chest. He looked at the sleeping Ning Chongging and unsheathed the saber and placed it on his neck. Senior apprentice brother, please go on your way. With a ruthless swipe, blood gushed out. He had used so much strength, and with the sharpness of the saber, Ning Chongging's head was instantly severed from his body. Looking at the decapitated corpse in front of him, Shirko frowned. He didn't think that this matter would be so easily accomplished. After checking and confirming that Ning Chongging was dead, Shirko flipped his hand and stabbed the saber into his own chest. His face suddenly paled, but there was a look of relief on his face. With a plop, he breathed his last. Shirko also had 10 mouths. When put together, they formed the character. His name was Yi Gui. He was a wandering ghost of a Yi family that had long been removed from the family. It could even be said that many years ago, when he discovered that he was a barbarian, Yi Gui had already died. What lived to this day was only an empty shell. Within the Golden Millet Kingdom, within Nank Mountain, there was a saying that touched upon the foundation of the great Tao. It was true and false and true. This world seemed no different from the outside world, but it was still an illusory world formed by two treasures. In this illusory world, if one was killed after they were awake, then they would truly die. This was the meaning of the words false and true. So, when Yigui committed suicide, he had truly killed himself. The body he left in the outside world had already lost all signs of life. Then, the Marquis Zhongwu, who was in a semi-conscious state but had actually woken up after being killed by him, naturally also died. 100 miles away from the Valley of Ghosts and Gods, in a deep forest, Li Ruhua was sitting on a slender branch, her body as light as a feather, as if she were weightless. Suddenly, her eyes brightened, and she revealed a bright and brilliant smile. This scene was like flowers blooming in the warmth of spring. It made one feel as if the entire world had suddenly become bright and beautiful. He's dead just like this. She closed her eyes and carefully sensed her surroundings. After confirming that the aura belonging to Marquis Zhongwu had completely disappeared, she opened her eyes and waved her fist. She laughed. Good, very good, this is simply too good. She stood up and stepped on a branch. A gust of wind blew past, causing her to rise and fall. Li Ruhua walked back and forth several times. Then, she suddenly jumped up and spread her arms like a fairy. Then, in the next moment, with a loud bang, she fell to the ground. She wouldn't fall. Even if she couldn't use her cultivation, her foundation was still there. Li Ruhua opened her eyes and looked around. Then, she looked down at her feet. She frowned and impatiently said, Li Mu, stop playing around. Let me out immediately. There was no response. Li Ruhua's frown deepened. She coldly sneered, I'm warning you, don't go too far, otherwise I will really be angry. As soon as she finished speaking, she flipped her hand, took out an object, and directly crushed it. With a light crack, the space suddenly distorted. But in the next moment, as if an invisible hand had grabbed the space, it pulled outward, and the distorted space immediately returned to normal. Li Ruhua staggered. This time, she really fell to the ground. She didn't get up. Her eyes were extremely cold as she slowly glanced around. She didn't know what went wrong, but it was obvious that something had really happened. Li Mu had always been a person with a sense of propriety. Even if he was joking, he would not go too far. In other words, all this had nothing to do with Li Mu, but he was the master of the Nank stone and the yellow millet tree. Except for him, who else could interfere in this world? And where did Li Mu go? Little girl, you have to keep your promise. You haven't finished your task yet. Of course, you can't leave now. A calm voice came from all directions. When it entered one's ears, one would not be able to tell where the person was. Li Ruhua was expressionless. You're playing tricks. Are you sure you want to be the enemy of the leaf family of the Central Wilderness? Wow, the leaf family of the Central Wilderness. I'm really scared, but that's all in the future. You should worry about yourself now. After a slight pause, the voice continued, Don't worry. I promised someone that I wouldn't harm your life. I will only let you go after you keep your promise. But don't even think about roasted fish. I'm very hungry. I can't eat you, so I can only use it to satisfy my hunger. Li Ruhua's pupils shrank. Something had happened to Li Mu. She was about to forcefully erupt her cultivation at all costs. But at this moment, a deep tiredness surged over her like a tide, sweeping away all obstacles, not giving her the slightest chance to resist. Her vision darkened, and she fell into a deep sleep. The space twisted slightly. A bamboo slip emerged, floating above Li Ruhua. After a moment of silence, a sneer came out. You got it easy. As it spoke, the bamboo slip unfolded and expanded. Like a sleeping mat, it wrapped around Li Ruhua and soared into the sky, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. On Nank Rock, beneath the yellow millet tree, Li Mu bitterly smiled, his face pale. If you do this, I will die. The tablet above his head jumped up as if it were slapping him on the head. You can choose whether to be killed by me now or die later. Li Mu's bitter smile deepened, but he didn't doubt that the person hidden within the tablet was surging with violent killing intent. If he dared to resist or continue to oppose it, he really would die. The other party's mood seemed to worsen by a great deal. Just by sensing it, he felt as if the world was collapsing. But this matter was originally done by you. So why are you so angry because of this? Li Mu couldn't figure it out. Ha! The tablet jumped up again. If you can't figure out, then don't think about it. I'm really hungry right now. Is the fish ready? If it's not, I will consider eating you. Li Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. He nodded again and again. It'll be ready soon. It'll be ready soon. Although I have a good relationship with you, it was you, Li Ruhua, who tricked me first and caused me to fall into such a situation. So, you brought this trouble upon yourself, so don't blame me for being disloyal. Turning to face the fire, Li Mu concentrated on roasting the fish. He didn't forget to completely retract his perception of Nank and yellow millet tree. Otherwise, if he really saw what happened next, he feared that Li Ruhua would really kill him to silence him. The tablet fell on top of his head. Clouds tumbled on its surface, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, giving off a stifling feeling. You smelly woman, I really want to eat you up. Nank Nation, upstream of the Blue Waves River, there was an ordinary village beneath a snowy mountain. Because more than half of the villagers had the surname Ox, after several disputes, the name Ox Village came to be. Towards this name, the villagers with different surnames were certainly dissatisfied. But fists were more effective than words. After being hammered several times, they cursed in their hearts, but no one dared to say anything. Simply put, the small families in the village lived a slightly sullen life, but they were not bullied to the point where they couldn't continue living. In the west of Yochi village, the Chin family's male master was a self-taught village doctor. Although he wasn't officially recognized, anyone in the surrounding villages who had a headache or fever could find him to treat them. People ate only 5 grains and got all sorts of illnesses. Who dared to say that they didn't have any difficulties in their lives? Over time, the Qin family status in the village gradually rose. Even the old Ox family, which had the most descendants in the east of the village and had more than 40 strong young men, also treated the Qin family's 3 members with great respect. 3 years ago, the Qin family's silly boy was swindled out of a large yellow ox. Several of the Ox family's brats mocked and ridiculed him. After being caught by the old Ox family, each of them was beaten several times, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. There were still some clever people who hurried to find the Qin family's male master. After he arrived, he stopped the old master, who was really angry. According to the old master, if it wasn't for Mr. Qin saving my life, I would have died by now. You bunch of ungrateful little bastards. After the incident, the Qin family's status in the village rose even higher. On the surface, everyone respected them, but when they saw the Qin family's boy, they couldn't help but shake their heads in their hearts. They thought to themselves that he looked like a decent lad, but they didn't expect him to be so stubborn. Not only was he swindled, but he also refused to admit it. He insisted that it was a betrothal gift for his future wife, and he was waiting for her to come back and marry him. Because of this, the surrounding matchmakers visited him several times in the past 2 years, but they were all rebuffed. After he was chased out of the Qin family, he added fuel to the fire, causing the Qin family's boy's reputation to become more and more disreputable in the surrounding villages. Gradually, no family had the thought of marrying off their daughter. They were afraid that their precious daughter would never be able to raise her head after marrying into the Qin family. Chapter 1606. In the past, Qin Yu had been too engrossed in the little fairy maiden and had fallen off the cow's back into the water. Now, 3 years had passed, and he had grown into a young man in his teens. He was tall, and his skin was dark, making him seem even more robust. He was a well-liked young man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had matchmakers visiting him one after another when he had just reached marriageable age in the countryside. Of course, the Qin family's solid financial situation and their status in the surrounding villages were also important factors. Ever since he had given away his family's large cow, little Qin Yu no longer tended cows. He began to learn how to identify herbs from his father. At the time, he had said that since the girl had accepted his betrothal gift, she could be considered his wife. In order to support his family in the future, he couldn't muddle through his days. He had to learn his family's skills so that he wouldn't suffer when taking care of his wife and children. Because of this, little Qin Yu didn't suffer a beating from both his parents when he lost his family's large cow. He thought of it as spending some money to enlighten his son. Today, little Qin Yu returned from the mountains. The basket on his back was filled with all sorts of herbs. His luck was quite good this time. He had dug up a wild ginseng in a cave in the mountains. From the smell of it, he could tell it wasn't young. Of course, he already knew the principle of not showing off one's wealth. He hid the wild ginseng in the middle of the basket and surrounded it with several other smelly herbs so that others wouldn't smell the ginseng. Gathering herbs in the mountains for money was one of the sources of income for mountain dwellers. Although the people of this area were simple and honest, they still had to be wary of others. This was what his mother said. Little Qin Yu felt it was reasonable. It wasn't until he left the mountains and arrived at a familiar path that he let out a sigh of relief. He smiled. If he brought this ginseng back, he would definitely be able to sell it for a high price. He quickened his pace. When he entered the village, little Qin Yu felt a bit strange. Normally, the villagers would gather here and chat to pass the time, but today he didn't see a single one. Not only that, but he also didn't see a single person in the village. This caused little Qin Yu to frown. He hoped that something bad had happened. Ox village at the foot of the mountain wasn't large. Soon, he passed through more than half the village. He could faintly hear some voices, as if many people were gathered together. After turning around a large tree, little Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. He ran over. This was because almost everyone in the village had gathered outside his house. "I'm back." No one knew who shouted, but the air suddenly became silent. Countless gazes turned to fall on him. This was the first time in his life that Qin Brat realized that a gaze could be so scorching hot. It was as if his entire body was on fire. In particular, there were some youngsters in the village who didn't have a good relationship with him. Now, their eyes were bloodshot, and envy was written all over their faces. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like a bad thing. Little Chin subconsciously slowed down and coughed lightly. "Uncles, may I ask, what happened to my family?" Old man Nyo, who had the loudest voice in the east of the village, knocked on his pipe with a face full of joy. He walked over and heavily patted Chin Brat's shoulder. "You brat, you're really good. This old man knew that you were an honest child and would definitely not lie. Heh, I really didn't expect that old ox would actually be able to see the person in the painting before I die. No, she's even more beautiful than in the painting. She's as beautiful as the fairy that I heard about when I went to the county city 30 years ago." This loud voice was like a broken gong. Several old fellows who were usually unconvinced and loved to argue with old man Nyo now all nodded their heads. It was rare that they didn't have any different opinions. Instead, they all agreed with his words. They thought that although old man Nyo had taken the opportunity to boast about his trip to the county city 30 years ago, his words weren't wrong at all. This Chin Brat must have accumulated 8 lifetimes of good karma. He actually managed to exchange a large yellow cow for such a wife. Thinking about the rumors in the village these past years, these old fellows thought that when they returned, they would definitely give the boys of their family a few ruthless slaps on the face and kick them, calling them trash. "That girl passed by our village in the past, so why didn't you guys meet her? Such a good wife. Yet you couldn't find her even when the sun was up." She ended up in old Chin's family, causing old Nyo's family to lose all face. Little boy Chin rubbed his head. "Grandpa Nyo, just what is going on? I'm still confused." Old man Nyo laughed out loud. "Don't ask. You'll know when you get home. What a good fortune. What a great fortune." The crowd parted. Little boy Chin walked to the entrance of his house. He immediately saw the large yellow cow tied outside the door. His eyes brightened. Without saying anything, he quickly walked in. Then, he saw his father and mother in the main hall, their faces cramped but full of smiles. Sitting across from them was a sage-like old Taoist. With just a glance, one could tell that he was a very capable old Taoist. His hair was white as snow, and he was smiling as he stroked his beard. Little boy Chin's eyes turned to look at the girl standing behind the old Taoist. Although 3 years had passed, and she had grown into a slender and elegant girl, he still recognized her at first glance. This was the little fairy maiden that had asked him for the yellow cow. His face flushed red. He took 2 steps forwards. "You've finally come." He rubbed his hands together, not knowing what to say. Mother Chin pulled at him. She smiled and said, "Old immortal, this is my son. His surname is Chin and his name is you. Do you think it's him?" Father Chin nodded. "Marriage is an important matter that must be confirmed. If there's a mistake, it will be a great deal of trouble." They had been husband and wife for dozens of years, so they certainly understood each other's thoughts. They were extremely satisfied with this girl in front of them, but this fairy maiden that fell from the heavens left them restless. It was best to be a bit more cautious. The old Taoist laughed. He looked at Chin Yu and bowed. "Don't worry, this poor Taoist has already chosen him. My disciple was betrothed to the Chin family's young master." He turned around and looked at Li Ruhua, who was blushing and not saying a word. His heart skipped a beat, but he immediately felt great. "My dear disciple, I brought you to Ox Village from so far away, just to keep the marriage promise from back then. Since you accepted Big Yellow as a betrothal gift, you should be married to the Chin family's young master. Are you willing to do this?" Deep in Li Ruhua's eyes, a trace of struggle flashed, but it disappeared in an instant. Her face flushed red, and she bowed. "I will follow teacher's arrangements." Taoist Cloudy Mist laughed, extremely carefree. "Good. Then I will make the decision for you and betroth you to the Chin family's young master." He stood up and said, "My 2 in-laws before I came to Ox Village. I calculated the 8 characters of my horoscope. 3 days from now is the best date. If you 2 have no objections, then how about we set the wedding date for that day?" "Great," Chin Yu blurted out. Outside the courtyard, there was a burst of laughter, but it was hard to hide the envy in this laughter. Father Chin, and Mother Qin nodded in agreement. After the Daoist stayed behind to eat lunch, he stood up and left with Li Ruhua. He said that he would come to Clear Cool Monastery halfway up Xiaoyang Mountain in 3 days to welcome the bride. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. The entertainment troupe that Father Qin had specially invited from the county town rushed straight to Xiaoyang Mountain. Outside and inside the village, anyone that knew about the Qin family's wedding would come without invitation. Along the way, there were many onlookers, making the scene extremely lively. Soon, the doors to Clear Cool Monastery opened wide. Normally, the monastery master was extremely imposing. Even if the county magistrate came to visit, he would still ignore him. But today he was dressed in new clothes, and his face was full of smiles. As he greeted the people of Ox Village who came to welcome the bride, he displayed 120% enthusiasm. This caused the originally nervous crowd to relax, and then they began to feel even more envious. It seemed that the rumors in the village that the old Taoist and that fairy maiden were true celestial beings weren't false at all. Otherwise, why would such a great figure like the monastery master of Clear Cool Monastery act like this? Perhaps a country bumpkin didn't have much experience, but he didn't lack any intelligence. The old Taoist sat down and accepted Qin Yu and the bride's bow. He smiled. Today, this poor Taoist congratulates the two of you on your marriage. In the future, you should love each other and spend 100 years together. After welcoming the bride, the procession returned to Ox Village, blowing the trumpets and beating the drums. The old Taoist politely declined the invitation to the wedding feast. He said that it was the custom of his hometown and that the bride's family wouldn't come today. But during this period of time, he would be temporarily cultivating at Clear Cool Monastery. In the future, there would surely be a chance for him to visit. After everyone left, the old Taoist waved his hand and sent away the respectfully bowing monastery master. Then, he stood up and walked into the back hall. With a light cough, the old Taoist bowed. I have already married Li Ruhua to the Qin family son. May I ask Senior to tell me what to do? Several breaths of time later, a voice appeared out of nowhere. I understand. After these 3 words were spoken, there was no more sound. Taoist Cloudy Mist, who had just escaped death, waited for a long time before slowly standing up. He couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. He thought that this person didn't seem to be in a good mood. Although this person didn't reveal anything and didn't target him in the slightest, he could faintly sense it. This caused Taoist Cloudy Mist's heart to tremble, as if a great catastrophe were about to befall him. After hesitating again and again, he didn't dare to disturb him any further. He bowed once more and took several steps back. The Qin family held a grand banquet. They invited all the guests, regardless of whether they knew them or not. As long as they gave them a congratulatory gift, they could enter the banquet and eat their fill. The several youths of the village had already been incomparably envious of Qin Yu, and after being ruthlessly taught a lesson by their old man, they decided that they would drink Qin Yu to the point where he wouldn't be able to consummate his marriage. Luckily, Qin Yu's father was already prepared for this. He gave Qin Yu a pill in advance to relieve the effects of alcohol. After the several youths drank too much, they began to cry and make a ruckus. The old man felt that they had lost face, so he used the rod to teach them a lesson. After repeatedly apologizing, he was dragged away. It could be imagined that these people today wouldn't live comfortably for the next period of time. After this matter, the pressure on Qin Yu was greatly reduced. But after the guests dispersed, he still drank until his face was flushed red and the smell of alcohol gushed out from his nose and mouth. It wasn't that the villagers didn't want to, but that after experiencing the attitude of Clear Cool Monastery, they didn't dare to. How could a fairy maiden of an immortal family be restrained by common logic? If they didn't do something, there might be a big problem. No one wanted to provoke trouble. Qin Yu staggered. After bidding farewell to his parents, he walked towards his room. As he was about to enter, he nearly tripped. When he looked down, he saw that there was a bamboo slip on the ground. He was a bit confused. He subconsciously picked it up, but he didn't have the mind to look at it. He placed it in his chest pocket and pushed open the door. At this time, he heard a dissatisfied, cold snort in his ears. Then, his field of vision fell into darkness. Then light lit up. Qin Yu's eyes widened, and he discovered that he was sitting in a side room of clear, cool monastery. In front of him was an old Taoist with the air of a transcendent being. The old Taoist was smiling at him and Li Ruhua, who had already changed her hair into a woman's bun. He was a bit confused, but he didn't know where the problem was. His memories were hazy, but he vaguely knew that today he was accompanying the bride to visit her elders. Good. The two of you must work harder and strive to bear fruit as soon as possible so that you won't disappoint this marriage. Everything in front of him darkened and then brightened. Qin Yu discovered that he was sitting in a newly built residence, holding a bamboo slip in his hands. In front of him was a young boy who was hugging his thigh, mumbling out his name as he called out Daddy. Li Ruhua's body had become even more plump and round. She walked over and pulled him back. Little fellow, don't disturb your daddy's reading. Mother will accompany you outside to play. Qin Yu reached out a hand. Just as he was about to say something, his field of vision darkened and then brightened. He discovered that he was examining someone's pulse. In front of him was a woman who was constantly coughing. She anxiously asked, Dr. Qin, am I all right? Ani, don't worry. You just caught a bit of a cold. It's fine. A calm voice echoed out from the side. A youth walked over and bowed. Father, I looked over the medical records just now and also examined your pulse. If you were worried, you wanted to take a look. Did you come to the same conclusion as me? Qin Yu nodded. It is indeed a cold illness. Before he could say anything else, his field of vision darkened once more. When he opened his eyes, he was standing beside a small grave mound. He held a bamboo slip in his hands, and beside him was a man and a woman, both dressed in mourning. Father, Mother has already been laid to rest. You must be more open-minded. Your son will be filial to you in the future and won't let you suffer. The bride nodded to her father-in-law. That's right. You haven't slept for 3 or 4 days. Come back with us and rest well. Only then did Qin Yu feel a deep exhaustion wash over him like a tide. His field of vision darkened, and he fell backwards. When he opened his eyes once more, he had already returned home. His son and wife were waiting at his side. As they saw him wake up, their eyes turned red. Father, you must take care of yourself. If something happens to you, how will we continue living? Qin Yu looked up at the ceiling. His heart was filled with sorrow, but there were also some puzzles in his mind. How would he live his life? Many of his memories were blurry. It was like he had experienced them before, but it was also like he had imagined them. Even the appearance of the woman who had accompanied him his entire life was beginning to become blurry. Was I confused? For the next 10 years, Qin Yu lived alone in his old courtyard. His son and wife were filial and gave birth to a pair of children. They were like two little people from a painting. They circled around him all day, constantly shouting, "Hug Grandpa" and "Hug Grandpa." There were several old men in the village who were around his age. All of them were jealous of him, saying that he was just lucky. In the past, he had relied on a large cow to deceive a fairy-like wife into giving birth to such a handsome son and a pair of beautiful grandchildren. All of them were filled with envy and jealousy. Qin Yu leaned against a tree and chuckled. He felt proud and satisfied. But in his mind, the memories of the woman who had accompanied him his entire life had become blurry. Perhaps she really was a very beautiful person. Then, Qin Yu lowered his head and continued to look through the bamboo slip in his hands. He had already read it for many years, but he still couldn't understand what was recorded on it. But his intuition told him that this jade slip was extremely important. It was something that he absolutely couldn't lose. He had to keep it by his side until the day he closed his eyes. Chapter 16:07. On Nang's stone, beneath the yellow millet tree, Li Ruhua's face was deathly pale. She bit her lips and her body tottered. She stubbornly stared at the small memorial tablet across from her, not hiding the resentment in her heart at all. A cold laugh sounded out from the memorial tablet. Don't look at me like that. It looks like you've suffered a great loss, but in my opinion, you've gained a great advantage. You should be happy in secret. Li Ruhua bit down on her lips, her breathing heavy. But in the end, She didn't lose her mind and seek her own death. Your goal has been achieved. Can I leave now? Her voice was hoarse and her body shivered. She was on the verge of collapse. Fog tumbled over the surface of the memorial tablet. Of course, but before I leave, I must remind you not to forget your current status. Puff! Li Ruhua spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked deeply at the tablet and then turned to leave. Shua! Her figure flashed, and she vanished without a trace. The voice from the memorial tablet coldly sneered again. It didn't care about Li Ruhua's gaze at all. He had merely borrowed the power of a marriage and borrowed half of her destiny. Compared to what he had done in the past, this was already very benevolent. Humph! She's gone. Come back. Space twisted, and Li Mu appeared out of thin air. He bitterly smiled and helplessly hung his head, looking listless and listless. Don't pretend to be pitiful. You know it's useless. To be able to preserve your life is already a very fortunate matter. Don't you think so? Li Mu bowed. You are right. The memorial tablet jumped up and patted his head. Remember what you should do. Don't disappoint me. I'm leaving. See you later. Shua. The memorial tablet vanished without a trace. Li Mu still maintained his bowing posture. After a long time, he let out a deep breath and slowly straightened himself. His expression was calm. There was no trace of the bitter smile and helplessness from before. Instead, he frowned and revealed a thoughtful look. Nank Nation, Ox Village in Xiaoyang Mountain. The old man of the Qin family, who had lived for 100 years, finally closed his eyes. He didn't suffer from illness or pain. Even if he slept after dinner, he would lose his breath in his dreams. 3 days after the coffin was laid to rest, the cries of the descendants of the Qin clan shook the heavens. Accompanied by the low growls of the young men in the village, the heavy coffin was slowly lifted all the way to the Qin clan cemetery. At the same time, halfway up the Xiaoyang Mountain, the Qinliang temple's door opened with a soft sigh. The white-haired Taoist priest Cloudy Mist walked out of the temple. He was followed by the obviously old and weak temple master, who was more respectful than ever, and a group of Qinliang temple's Taoists. Young Master Qin has passed away. Follow me and perform a ritual to help young Master Qin enter reincarnation as soon as possible. Yes. Taoist Cloudy Mist rode the wind, and Taoist Qinliang Temple followed respectfully behind him. They arrived at the Qin family's graveyard, which immediately attracted many exclamations. The Qin clan's descendants had long since seen the old immortal's portrait. They were all shocked and hastily bowed respectfully. You don't have to be so courteous. This humble Taoist and your Qin clan have quite a bit of fate. He stopped there and didn't say anything else. In fact, Taoist Cloudy Mist didn't know the truth either. However, there was one thing that he was very clear about. The seemingly ordinary Qin family was definitely not ordinary. Although young Master Qin had died, he still didn't want to provoke them in the slightest. The ritual was successfully completed under Taoist Cloudy Mist's leadership. The coffin was buried, and the round grave was completed. The filial son and daughter knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. The paper money was ignited, and a gust of wind rolled up the ashes and scattered them in all directions. The Taoist Qinliang Temple's Taoist priest had already been sent away. Taoist Cloudy Mist stood in front of the grave and looked at the 2 round grave mounds in front of him. His eyes were slightly obscure, and there was even more confusion and curiosity in them. However, he was very clear that in this world, it was better not to know many things than to know. Curiosity could kill a person. You're smart. Otherwise, so what if you've lived for a few more decades? You're going to die today. A cold laugh resounded in his mind. Taoist Cloudy Mist was frightened and immediately bowed. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. He was terrified in his heart, but after a few decades, he was a little excited to hear this voice again. From today onwards, you will cultivate on Xiaoyang Mountain and protect the Qin bloodline for generations to come. There is no need for you to meddle in everything. You can decide what you want to do. As the voice fell, a cultivation method appeared in his mind. Taoist Cloudy Mist glanced at it, and his face flushed red with excitement. He knelt down towards the grave mounds and respectfully kowtowed. The descendants of the Qin family were frightened. Before they could speak, Taoist Cloudy Mist waved his hand and interrupted them. Sir Qin is this poor Taoist benefactor. There is no need to ask about the specifics. In the future, your Qin family will receive my protection. This will not change even for 1,000 years. Demonic sect Master Knight demons, living courtyard, in an underground chamber. Qin Yu was sitting cross-legged. His eyelids moved several times before he slowly opened them. After a brief moment of confusion, he soon composed himself. His eyes slowly swept around. "You're awake?" A figure appeared. His complexion was gloomy. It was clear he wasn't in a good mood. Qin Yu's heart relaxed. He rubbed his temples and said, "What is going on?" "I've already entered Nank and Golden Millet Realms, but why don't I have any memories of them? Moreover," he stood up and looked down at himself. Besides a bit of tiredness, as if he had slept for a long time, there wasn't anything different about him. Qin Yu looked at Little Meaty, waiting for her to give him an explanation. Little Meaty coldly sneered. "What? I was responsible for sending you in. Do you think I can guarantee that you will obtain some harvests?" Her complexion became increasingly gloomy, and it was clear she was in an even worse mood. "Qin Yu, you need to understand that this is your own problem." He didn't know what was wrong with her, but it was as if she had eaten gunpowder. Qin Yu was a bit puzzled, but his intuition told him that it was best not to provoke her. Otherwise, he really might suffer a great deal. So, Qin Yu took a step back and nodded. "All right, this is my problem. It has nothing to do with you." This caused her anger to reach the edge of eruption. She had already planned to make this bastard Qin Yu suffer a little, but now she choked on her words. Her face flushed red, and she angrily snorted and left. Qin Yu thought that it was a close call. He stood up and followed. After leaving the chamber, Little Meaty didn't stop. She walked straight out of the courtyard and pushed open the door. She saw the Sect Master Knight demon standing outside. Mississippi, the Sect Master Knight demon bowed. As he sensed Little Meaty's gloomy expression, his eyes turned icy cold as they fell on Qin Yu. If an extreme ruler really wanted to go all out, Qin Yu might not be afraid. But this sort of inexplicable gaze left him speechless. "Even if I was wrong, shouldn't you at least tell me where I was wrong?" Women, women, no matter what their cultivation level was or how long they had lived in the world, they were always unpredictable and temperamental creatures. He couldn't provoke them. He really couldn't. "Humph." Little Meaty coldly coughed. The sect master's complexion changed. He quickly looked away, took a deep breath, and bowed towards Qin Yu. "Son-in-law, this subordinate has offended you. I ask that you don't blame me." "Humph." Little Meaty coldly coughed again. The Sect Master Knight demon's forehead dripped with sweat. He didn't know whether to stand or not. Qin Yu's eyes revealed a bit of schadenfreude. He thought, "Now you understand my feelings a little." Luckily, Little Meaty didn't seem to be truly angry. After her cold cough, her complexion actually relaxed a little. Qin Yu frowned, thinking that she was far too difficult to serve. Little Meaty glared at him. Although she didn't say anything, her meaning was clear. "Do you want to die?" Qin Yu pretended not to see it. The Sect Master Knight demon coughed. He respectfully said, "Miss Son-in-law, since you have come to the demon's sect, I wonder if you can stay for a day or two so that this subordinate can express his gratitude." Little Meaty coldly said nothing. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and said, "Chief, I appreciate your good intentions, but I have a Western Wasteland imperial decree on my back and must arrive at the border army camp on time. It is not good for me to stay here any longer." The Sect Master Knight demon nodded in understanding. "If that's the case, then this subordinate will send Miss and son-in-law away." Little Meaty glanced at him and sneered. She grabbed Qin Yu and stepped away, instantly vanishing from sight. Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, the Sect Master Knight demon stood up, a bitter smile on his face. After the Miss had awakened, it was as if she had become a completely different person. The way she looked at him sometimes caused even this peak sovereign powerhouse to feel a chill run down his spine. It was far too terrifying, but now He had finally grasped what the miss liked and liked. Just now, although she seemed to be sneering, the truth was that her mood was much better. The sect master knight demon stood up and shook his head. He thought that Marquis Zhongmuning Qin was only a trivial early sovereign realm cultivator. So how could he be worthy of the miss? He also had no idea why the miss would value him so much. He took a deep breath, suppressing the thoughts that he shouldn't be thinking about as a vassal. The sect master knight demon turned and returned to the courtyard, entering a secret chamber without stopping. When he arrived in a corner, he bowed. Space twisted, and the memorial tablet appeared once more. However, the fog that lingered on its surface was much thinner. Even the remnant soul within had fallen into a deep slumber, unable to respond. The sect master knight demon had a worried expression. He looked at the memorial tablet several times and then put away the secret technique, allowing it to disappear once more. Nank Nation, Qin Family Cemetery. Li Mu's figure appeared out of thin air, standing between the old and the new round tombs. He stared intently, but it was as if he was looking at flowers through the fog. It was obvious that there was a problem here, but the other party didn't try to hide it at all. It was so obvious that it was right in front of him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't curious. As long as he waved his hand, he could open the tomb and erase the fog in front of him. But after thinking about it again and again, Li Mu sighed. In the end, he didn't take that step. He turned around and disappeared. After several breaths of time, Daoist cloudy mist rushed to the Qin family cemetery. But no matter how he searched, he couldn't find anything wrong. But just now, the array formation he laid down clearly sensed something. Could it be that he had made a mistake? At this time, Li Mu was already in Ox Village. He stood in the air above the courtyard in the west of the village, looking down at the Qin family descendants. They were all ordinary people, and there was nothing special about them. At most, their destiny was better, and they would be rewarded in the future. He went through so much trouble just to seize half of Li Ruhua's destiny? I always feel that things are not so simple. Li Mu touched his chin. With a thought, he left Nank State. He was now the master of Nank Stone and the Yellow Grain Tree. Although he only had half of it, it was enough for him to incarnate into the rules of heaven and earth here. He could enter and leave with just a thought. It was even easier to deceive others' senses and not be detected. The reason why Daoist Cloudy Mist could feel a trace of unusual aura was that Li Mu deliberately let him notice it and then take a look at this old Daoist who had suddenly risen on the road to cultivation. But in the end, he still found nothing, which made him quite disappointed. When his divine soul returned to his body, Li Mu opened his eyes and murmured, "I've never lacked patience. Then I'll wait and see. The truth will come to light one day." There was a knock on the door. Li Mu exhaled and revealed a helpless look. Sure enough, when he did something wrong, he would have to pay for it. He had already expected this day, so he didn't think of running away. He got up and opened the door. Li Ruhua stood outside the door with a cold face. But the way she looked at him was not cold, just a little complicated. Li Mu sighed. "Come in and have a cup of tea." Li Ruhua was expressionless. "Do you think I'm still in the mood to drink tea now?" Both of them were asking questions. Li Mu thought for a moment. After all, she had suffered a big loss, so he decided to take a step back. "It's okay if you don't drink tea. I'll give you some compensation for this matter." Li Ruhua bit her lip. Li Mu raised his hand and swore, "I promised that before you entered Ox Village, my connection with Nank Stone and Yellow Grain Tree had been completely cut off, so I don't know what exactly happened." He said it with sincerity and certainty. But of course it was all false. As the rule of this realm, even if he was not there at that time, he could still go back in time and see anything he wanted to know. Li Ruhua took a deep look at him and said, "There's no need for compensation. I just want you to promise that this matter will never be known by anyone except you and me." "Okay." Li Mu nodded solemnly. Li Ruhua turned around and left. Li Mu said behind her, "Are you going to continue looking for Barbarian Emperor? My suggestion is that you should return to the Central Wilderness as soon as possible." Li Ruhua didn't look back. "I know what to do." Her figure flew far away, disappearing from sight. Li Mu closed the door, returned to the table, and sat down. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. What a stubborn little girl. But as that person said, losing half of your luck might be an advantage for you. Sometimes one couldn't just look at the surface. And he just happened to be someone in this world who was best at observing the essence of things through the surface. Loyal Marshal Marquis Ning Qin. Interesting, really interesting. But thinking about it, even a rare creature like the barbarian emperor had arrived at this time. Was there anything that couldn't happen? The emergence of a new era meant that there would be a great upheaval between the heavens and earth. But to Li Mu, wasn't this also an opportunity? The 13th floor, the white jade capital above the highest heavens. He also wanted to see the scenery up there. The supernatural abilities of flesh and blood were always convincing. For instance, when she pulled on Qin Yu's hand and took a step forward, the two of them returned to the airship that was rushing towards the border army. From beginning to end, including the 4/4 claws from the Imperial Palace, no one noticed anything at all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this was a marvelous technique. Let's go. After throwing down these words, the flesh and blood figure vanished. Although her mood was a little better, she still couldn't help but feel annoyed when she faced Qin Yu. She always felt that she was so considerate, but Qin Yu was just an ignorant blockhead. No matter how she calculated this, she had suffered a great loss. Chapter 1608. Qin Yu sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. He slowly drank several mouthfuls, and when the tea reached the bottom, he poured himself another cup. He repeated this a few times, drinking a bellyful of tea. However, he still couldn't figure out what exactly happened in Nank and Yellow Millet regions. There seemed to be some memories in his mind, but they were blurry and extremely faint. It was like the muddy waters of the Yellow River that reflected the scenery of the mountains and rivers. No matter how hard he tried to open his eyes, all he could see was a blur. Even so, the scenery still existed. It was just that Qin Yu couldn't see it clearly, but that didn't mean it was an illusion. Stone Tower. He spoke in a low voice, but there was no response. It was as if that distant stone pagoda that had once again seen the light after experiencing the darkness had once again fallen into a deep slumber. Or perhaps he had no choice but to sleep to avoid falling into an incomparably dangerous situation. Qin Yu was a bit annoyed, but as he thought about it, his complexion gradually calmed down. When it came to sucking up to someone's thigh, there were always gains and losses. He had to carefully consider his limits. At the very least, it was still within the scope of what he could accept. Well, to be more precise, these words were a bit hypocritical. If it were anyone else in Qin Yu's shoes, then even if they took 100 steps back, they still wouldn't feel like they were losing out. He had temporarily suppressed the investigation of what happened in Nank and Golden Millet. But this didn't mean that he had given up. Take a step back and wait for the right time. There is no need to commit crimes against the wind and make things difficult for yourself and others. He took a deep breath and let go of a worry in his heart. Then, he closed his eyes and used the tea in his belly to observe the differences. Even though his memories were blurry and he had no idea what had happened, there were no obvious changes to his body. However, he felt that there was still a change, just that it was not obvious. In the end, he came up empty-handed. This caused Qin Yu to sigh and completely give up, since Little Meaty was unwilling to let him know the inside story. Then, with her methods, she would be able to keep it a secret. Forget it. Since it's all just wishful thinking, I might as well let it all go. Go and cultivate. Western Wilderness, Imperial Palace. The great emperor above the ninth heaven looked at the jade scroll in his hand and crushed it into powder. His expression was indifferent and his eyes were even colder. But this coldness wasn't directed at Qin Yu. The Marquis Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, had nothing to do with the new Goliath sovereign. He could already confirm that this was enough. But that third-generation disciple of the Li family, who acted recklessly because of her extraordinary status, had probably forgotten her current status. No matter how dazzling she had been in the distant past, she was now just a little girl who hadn't even reached the Emperor realm. He dared to make a deal with the emperor of a country and even tried to kill him in secret. Did he really think that he could deceive everyone and clear his name? The Central Wastelands Lee family was indeed a great mountain. Even when facing a country, they still had confidence and confidence. But that referred to the entire Lee family, not a single person. Li Ruhua's weight was far from enough. If she was smart enough, she would directly return to the Middle Wasteland. This debt would be noted down for now. There would definitely be a day when she would get back at him. Since you don't want to leave, then don't leave. Within the cage, lightning flashed. Countless bolts of lightning exploded, turning into a pool of lightning that was not very large but had a majestic aura. Li Siji was trapped within. All of his hair turned to ash. He screamed and his face twisted. Lightning poured into his mouth and nose, wanting to extinguish all life. If it weren't for his current strange state, where he seemed weak but his vitality was boundless, he would have long since turned to ashes. Since the Marquis loyal marshal, Ning Qin was fine, then something would happen to him. This was a simple truth. The boiling of the lightning pool represented the anger in His Majesty's heart. The reason why he did not appear personally was because this crazy third prince was no longer worth his time. After a long time, the thunder stopped. The twitching Li Siji slumped to the ground. He gasped for breath like a big fish that had been tossed onto the shore. His eyes were red, but there was no fear in them. Rather, there was a bit of confusion. This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. Li Siji whispered. The redness in his eyes became increasingly deep, like two seas of blood, so deep that one couldn't see the end. Western Wasteland, Long Island. It was called Chong because it was really long. It was 7,900 miles long, but the narrowest part was only 3 or 4 miles. Standing here, one could only see blue waves on both sides. It was located in the Thousand Islands County of the Western Wilderness. Its territory was divided into a large lake that was 100,000 miles wide. There were countless islands scattered about. Thus, it was also called the Thousand Islands River. Thousand Islands River. If someone still mentions this name, then they're either a young junior that wants to show off, or they're really old and experienced. Old Master Min set off from Chong Island and took a boat to cruise the lake. Along the way, he admired the scenery and sighed with emotion. There was regret that he had to abandon his old home for many years. But there was also a sense of complacency and pride that came from revisiting an old place that had changed. What he was proud of was that even after so many years, he was still able to live peacefully in Chongqing. He could watch flowers bloom and wilt, and he was still a carefree person in the world. As for those great figures who had bared their teeth at him back then, all of them had died long ago and disappeared from the world. Their cultivation of the great path had been cultivated to nothing in the end. Opening his mouth, old Master Min suddenly swept away the melancholy of leaving his hometown. His heart was at ease, and he even had the aura of a free and easy home where his heart was at peace. Looking at his son, who was frowning and looking lost, he couldn't help but hate him for not living up to his expectations. She was just a coquettish fox. Why did he have to worry about her? She had really embarrassed the old Master Min family. But after all, he knew what it was like for a young man to know his worry for the first time. These were all experiences that he had to go through. He thought angrily for a while, but he didn't say much. There was still a long way to go. When he saw more and experienced more, he would naturally be able to cultivate a heart that wouldn't be shaken by external things. If he didn't even have this level of skill, how could he talk about longevity and coexist with heaven and earth? It was just a joke. Seeing that the border army camp was just around the corner, and the general and madam had yet to return, Saint Baidu had a calm expression as if he knew everything. But in reality, he was panicking and couldn't sleep at night. An imperial general led an army to guard the border. Leaving halfway was already a taboo. Not returning for a long time was even more taboo. Now, he was just covering it up, and no one had pointed it out. But once he arrived at the border army camp, he naturally couldn't avoid it. Some things were just like how the Empire and the Western barbarians openly smuggled goods for profit, but they were done in a way that couldn't be criticized. Now, The general was seen as a thorn in the side of the later Yi family. If he was found out and suddenly attacked, even His Majesty would find it difficult to take care of him. After all, some rules in the army still had to be followed. Otherwise, if they were too biased, how could they convince the masses in the future? Wu Shuai turned a blind eye to the general, but when the storm of playing the zither ended, he also lost a layer of face. It was just that the military left some face for this general who had just been torn apart by His Majesty and didn't officially reprimand him. But seeing the general suffer, Wu Shuai was sure to be happy. He might even take the initiative to add fuel to the fire. Otherwise, if he didn't do anything, then, as the Western Border Army's Grand Marshal, he would truly be treated as a clay bodhisattva who couldn't even protect himself. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. True Saint Bayou's mouth was filled with blisters, and he felt a terrible pain whenever he moved. He could only hide in his room all day and pretend that everything was fine so that he wouldn't have to face the probing words of the soldiers. But time couldn't fool anyone, and he couldn't avoid it. Even if he intentionally delayed, the speed of the airship was just barely enough to arrive at the border army camp within the time limit set by the military. But he had arrived. True Saint Bayou clenched his teeth and pushed open the door with blisters in his mouth. Whether this was a blessing or a curse, if he hit his head, he would suffer this knife. Seeing this highly regarded advisor of Marquis, loyal marshal, in such a pitiful state, the generals gathered on the airship all felt their hearts skip a beat. Then they groaned inwardly. Starting from Blue River, these people had already been labeled as Marquis, loyal marshal, Ningqin. If something happened to their commander, then they would also be implicated. The more informed generals vaguely knew that Marquis, loyal marshal, Ningqin, and the Yi family were like fire and water. Their complexions had already turned ashen. They weren't familiar with this Marquis, so they couldn't help but feel a bit of resentment in their hearts. It was fine for him to bring his wife back to his mother's family. After all, this was a glorious moment, and he had to go to his wife's family to show off. This was also human nature. But because of this, he had actually delayed for so many days. Even when the army arrived at the camp, he still hadn't returned to the army. This was because he didn't know the gravity of the situation. To put it more seriously, it could even be said that he relied on His Majesty's favor and didn't place military rules in his eyes. Such a commander, even if he was Marquis, loyal marshal, wouldn't have a good ending in the future. He wasn't worth following. Facing everyone's eyes, True Saint Bayou took a deep breath. His lips moved, but before he could speak, he felt a searing pain and his face couldn't help but twitch. At this time, there was the sound of footsteps behind him, followed by a calm voice. "Since you've all come, then let's wait a bit. Once Marshal Wu sends someone over, we can return to the camp." True Saint Bayou took a deep breath. He tried his best to maintain his composure. He turned and respectfully bowed. "Greetings, Marquis." At this moment, he nearly wept. "Marquis, you came just in time. If you were any closer, I wouldn't have been able to make it in time. But my dear Marquis, can we not play so excitedly next time? My little heart really can't stand it." On the deck of the airship, the generals all fell to their knees. "Greetings, Marquis." Qin Yu waved his hand, a faint smile on his face. "I left for a while, and then came back because I was busy cultivating, so I didn't have time to properly meet with you all. But it doesn't matter. In the future, you will all be in the army, and there will be opportunities to get closer." His eyes swept over everyone, a faint smile on his face. But the words he spoke caused a cold sweat to appear on everyone's foreheads and their backs. "I have only managed an ordinary army. After all, I am someone who left halfway through my career, so I cannot compare with you generals who have been in the army for so many years. But I only have one request, and that is that all military orders must be obeyed. If you can do it, then I will guarantee you great riches and honor in the future. Otherwise, stand out as soon as possible. While you and I still have a chance, let's part on good terms so that in the future, my military laws won't be merciless. I dare not. I will fulfill my duty and act according to your orders." Just as everyone stood up, they all fell to their knees. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. "Stand up. With everyone's words, I can rest assured. He turned his head and looked at Bai Su, whose mouth was full of fire bubbles and who was in a sorry state. Write it down. In the future, if I forget it, just remind me who is here today. Bai Yu solemnly nodded. He straightened his back, secretly pleased with himself. He thought to himself, "You bunch of rude and unreasonable bastards of the army. You weren't respectful to me before, but now you know who your grandfather is?" He stood up and looked up. His eyes were especially earnest as he swept his eyes over every face on the deck. These generals who had slaughtered their way through the army for so many years to reach their current status felt as if there was a blade on their backs, and even more regret. But their faces remained calm, not revealing anything at all. Qin Yu nodded inwardly. He thought that there was a reason why the generals of the Western Wilderness were able to stand out from the crowd. They weren't just a bunch of good-for-nothings. Soon, a messenger hurried in from the Western Border Army camp. "I have come on the orders of Marshal Wu to welcome Great General back to the Border Army." Qin Yu nodded. "Concerning the arrangement of the army, what orders does Marshal Wu have?" The messenger's forehead dripped with sweat. His tone became even more respectful. "Marshal Wu has ordered that Great General bring back the army. Everything will be arranged by you, and the martial tent will not interfere." True Saint Baiyu's lips curled up in a cold sneer. Compared to when he and the general led 100,000 troops to reinforce the Western Border Army, the treatment they received was as different as the heavens and earth. After all, those 100,000 troops hadn't even been warmed in the general's hands before they had all been dispatched by the martial tent. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Thank you, Marshal. It would be impolite of me to refuse." He swept his eyes over the generals. "The mine is now my station. Follow the directions and go there. As for the supplies and expenses of the camp, I will ask Marshal Wu for them." "Yes, Lord Marquis." Qin Yu stood up. "Let's go. I will follow you to the camp and pay my respects to Marshal Wu." When a great general returned to the camp, it was reasonable for him to pay his respects to the martial tent. Only then could it be considered proper etiquette. But today, in the eyes of all the generals of the Western Border Army camp, Marquis Loyal Marshal, who had sent away his 400,000 troops and only brought a few personal guards with him to the martial tent, was carrying the momentum of a thunderstorm to demand an explanation from the martial tent. After all, his previous words of, "I will ask Marshal Wu for the supplies and expenses of the camp," had already spread throughout the border army, revealing his sharpness. A third-class Marquis Loyal Marshal, a great general of the same rank. When Qin Yu returned to the border army camp, he could feel the difference in his status and the changes it brought. Along the way, all the generals he encountered bowed to the side of the road. Without any hindrance, he arrived at the martial tent. The personal guard guarding outside the martial tent took the initiative to bow. Without waiting for Qin Yu to speak, he said that the marshal and the various generals were already waiting inside. As he spoke, he bowed and reached out a hand to open the tent. Qin Yu stepped forwards, but at this time, he suddenly frowned, a look of surprise in his eyes. In front of him, the tall martial tent guard who had bowed and opened the tent to invite him and still had his head bowed. But he punched out his fist. It was like a vast river bursting through a dam, sweeping away all living things. This was a ruler realm, an existence that stood at the peak of a mountain. His killing intent soared to the heavens. Before this guard attacked, Qin Yu hadn't sensed any abnormal aura. This person either cultivated a powerful secret art that could lock in his aura, or he had a treasure in his hand that could deceive the perception of the outside world. However, no matter what the truth was, it was no longer important. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He stepped forwards, and space instantly twisted. Countless tiny marks appeared from within. Dong! There was a heaven-shaking explosion, like a giant ox shaking a mountain. The martial tent guard that had just punched out vomited blood from his head and was sent flying far away. Chapter 1609. At the imperial capital's Loyal Marshal Marquis mansion, when Qin Yu broke through to the next realm, he had thought of hiding himself. At the critical moment, he would use his initial realm cultivation to surprise his opponent. He knew that his opponent's expression would be wonderful at that time. But today, when he returned to the Western Border Army camp and saw the assassination attempt outside the commander's tent, he suddenly changed his original thoughts. Since he wanted the commander's tent to give him an explanation, the more important he was, the better. His cultivation realm was obviously a big factor. Cries of alarm sounded out one after another. With the sound of breaking air, several figures appeared, suppressing the assassin. He fell to the ground, sobbing blood, unable to stand up again. But it was obvious that he had already expected this. He knew that there was only one chance to assassinate him outside the commander's tent. Thus, he used his full strength and erupted with his strongest killing intent. He didn't think that loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin would hide his strength so deeply. Although he only revealed his early sovereign realm cultivation, he was actually an extreme powerhouse. Since he failed to kill the assassin, he was naturally disappointed. But luckily, he wouldn't die in vain. There would surely be a storm today. The assassin stuffily coughed. Blood flowed out from his orifices. A terrifying and wild strength erupted from his body. Wu Tongtian stepped forwards, arriving beside the assassin. He lifted his hand and pressed down. With a loud bang, countless rays of golden light bloomed. Like a giant mouth, it swallowed the assassin. Rumble, rumble. A deep rumbling sound filled the air, like thunder exploding in the distant skies. Golden light violently twisted. Wu Tongtian frowned, and a trace of paleness appeared on his face. But in the blink of an eye, he recovered. He turned his hand, and the golden light vanished. Outside the commander's tent, several figures appeared. They bowed to Wu Tongtian from afar and left. Their mission was to ensure the safety of the commander's tent. Now that the assassin had been killed, the investigation, appeasement, and pacification had nothing to do with them. Several figures appeared at the broken entrance of the commander's tent. Although Wu Tongtian had suppressed the assassin's indiscriminate destruction, Qin Yu didn't have any intention of protecting the commander's face. Of course, this was completely reasonable, and no one would criticize him. After all, he was a dignified marquis, level border army general. For him to encounter an assassination outside the commander's tent was a joke in itself. Since he had already become a joke, there was naturally no need to talk about face. Yi Sangdo's face was as gloomy as water. His brows were tightly furrowed and his eyes were heavy. Jiang Qingzi glanced at Qin Yu. Seeing that he was safe and sound, he relaxed a little. Then, he sighed with emotion. Zhao Chang's reaction was the most obvious. If not for the fact that the situation was inappropriate, he would have rushed forward and asked about Qin Yu's well-being. But even if he didn't move, there was enough emotion in his eyes to make people feel that he cared about Marquis Zhongwu. The other border army generals all lowered their heads. Even though their expressions were heavy, they didn't reveal the slightest bit of emotion to avoid provoking trouble. At the entrance of the messy commander's tent, there was a short period of silence. But in this silence, everyone's eyes were filled with shock as they looked at Qin Yu. Marquis Zhongwu, Ningqin, actually had such cultivation. The speed at which his cultivation rose and the degree to which he did so was hard to imagine. After all, when he left the Western Border Army and returned to the imperial capital, he was only at the Saint level. Even if he had some hidden cards and methods, how could he be compared to what he was today? Just now, he had forcefully resisted the assassin's fist and was able to cause severe wounds. Just this point alone was enough to prove his current strength. This caused everyone to subconsciously think back to the news that came from the imperial capital. Marquis Zhongwu, Ningqin, had made a breakthrough in his cultivation and received feedback from the destiny of the nation. He had been able to absorb so many incense sticks that he had set a new record. It was clear that Marquis Zhongwu's sudden rise in cultivation was related to this. Wu Tongtian opened his mouth to break the silence. He looked at Qin Yu, his expression solemn. Marquis Zhongwu, I guarantee that I will investigate this matter to the end and give you an explanation. No matter how much he cursed in his heart, he had to make a statement. The assassination had occurred outside the commander's tent, and the assassin had been hiding amongst the guards. Moreover, he had taken the initiative to step forward and welcome Chinyu into the tent. This in itself proved that his status was quite eye-catching amongst the guards, all of these matters superimposed upon each other. It was doomed that Wu Tongtian would never be able to extricate himself from this matter. As the saying went, if a basin of yellow mud was poured into the crotch of one's trousers, the result would be the same. But now, as long as one witnessed the assassination from start to finish, they wouldn't believe that this was really Wu Tongtian's doing. Even if Wu Tongtian wanted to kill someone, he wouldn't be so stupid as to use such a method. Whether he succeeded or not, he would still be caught up in it. Of course, thoughts are just thoughts. Besides Wu Tongtian's trusted aides in the commander's tent, no one would reveal their thoughts. As for what the truth of the matter was, it was still hard to say. After all, who here hadn't experienced the tactic of injuring oneself to gain the confidence of others and hiding under the lamp? Watch more and speak less. Since this matter had nothing to do with them, they might as well sit back and watch lest they be drawn into the turbulent undercurrents. However, even though this was the case, for a dignified Marquis General to be assassinated outside the commander's tent, no matter who the mastermind was, they had displayed sufficient madness. This caused all of the generals present to feel a chill rise in their hearts. Strife for power, struggles in the open and in the dark, and even life and death battles were common in the army. But to disregard the rules and act in such a cruel and brutal manner, this still crossed the bottom line of any struggle. Perhaps it was an exaggeration to say that everyone was in danger, but in the future, it was inevitable that they would be more cautious and careful. Chinyu scattered his aura and cupped his hands together towards Wu Tongtian. I naturally believe the words of the great marshal. Then, I ask you to clearly investigate this matter. After a brief pause, he smiled and said, I will wait in the commander's tent for the result. The atmosphere suddenly tensed up. Marquis Zhongwu, who had already revealed his sharpness, used these words to display his tough attitude once more. But he was already in reason, and now he had been assassinated. Although he was strong and rude, no one dared to say anything. Of course, there were also some who hid on the side to watch the fun. In the army, each person had their own position. Only by causing a ruckus would there be a chance of a vacancy opening up for them. After all, water flowed to the low places and people walked to the high places. This was an instinct. Wu Tongtian frowned for a moment before immediately composing himself. Good. Everyone returned to the commander's tent. As the commander issued the order, there was a moment of chaos. All those who had dealings with the assassin were temporarily detained, and interrogations were being carried out. The first thing they obtained was information about the assassin's background. According to the records of the army, the assassin was called Gao Yu. He had been in the army for over 100 years and had always bravely killed his enemies. He had made many meritorious contributions, and after being investigated, he had been promoted to guard the commander's tent. As for Gao Yu, he had served in the commander's tent for over 10 years. He had always been diligent and had never made any mistakes. 3 years ago, in a great war with the barbarians, he had defended the commander's flag. He had fought to the death without retreating and had sustained over 30 wounds. Afterwards, he had received a reward. Of course, now that the fact that Gao Yu was an assassin had been exposed, this reward had become even more glaring. The assistant officers responsible for investigating the merits of the army and reporting them had pale faces. They faced the interrogators and complained that they had been wronged. After all, Gao Yu was indeed a soldier worthy of praise in the army. Who would have thought that he was an assassin? A ruler realm expert was actually willing to hide deep within the army for 100 years, never revealing the slightest trace of his true identity. It was hard to imagine. Gao Yu's background was extremely clean, and everything about him could be investigated. But it was clear that the real Gao Yu had likely died. To a ruler, impersonating someone else was a very simple matter. The interrogators would continue to investigate this matter. They had to find the unlucky bastard that had suffered the wrath of the commander's tent, but this wasn't the main direction. The interrogators continued to investigate Gao Yu's family and friends. But it was clearly written on his background that all of his family members had died in a great war between the barbarians and the desolate lands. Thus he had joined the army. Although he had a few friends, none of them knew anything about him. Of course, the interrogators carrying out military law wouldn't judge them as ignorant just because they said a few words or cried out that they were wronged. They had their own verification procedures. Seeing that no one in the commander's tent had any objections to the results of this interrogation, they knew that this verification procedure was indeed reliable. Whether it was bloody or anything else, it wasn't within the scope of the commander's tent's attention. The investigation fell into an impasse. This was because no matter how they looked, they couldn't find any flaws. They couldn't find out Gao Yu's motive or who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Looking at the Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin sitting across from Yi Sangdu in the commander's tent, calmly drinking tea, as if he didn't care about the impasse in front of him, everyone sighed inwardly. In the countless years of the Western Border Army, this person in front of them was the first person that could act so forcefully in front of Commander Wu. Since Marquis Zhongwu didn't give up, Commander Wu fell silent for a moment and then ordered them to continue digging. Luckily, this deadlock didn't continue for too long. A turning point soon appeared. It turned out that the interrogators had grasped a key point from the interrogation. Gao Yu liked to drink wine. This was something that others had also said. When he wasn't on duty, he liked to drink alone. To cultivators, as long as they grasped the proper limits, drinking wine wasn't a great taboo. But for Gao Yu, who had already been promoted to guard the commander's tent and had a bright future ahead of him, continuing to drink wine seemed a bit inappropriate. Of course, this could also be explained as Gao Yu having no ambitions and didn't want to climb to a high position in the army. Or perhaps he was addicted to alcohol and didn't want to give it up, and so on and so forth. There were many reasons, but to the interrogators of the army, if they found something suspicious, they had to investigate it. Any small gap could become the beginning of the destruction of the entire levy. What Gao Yu liked to drink the most was a coarse brew called black iron wine. The wine was as spicy as its name suggested. It was produced 1,000 miles away from the border army camp, in a small city called Iron Thorn. The interrogators rushed to Iron Thorn City and found the workshop that produced the black iron wine. They took control of everyone there, and soon, a woman who sold the wine appeared in the interrogator's line of sight. The reason was simple. This woman's appearance wasn't bad, and her white flesh was even rarer. In this small city on the border, she could be considered one of the top women. At the start, the interrogation didn't go smoothly. The woman cried and wiped away her tears. She only said that although she did have a few casual affairs with a man in the army called Gao Yu, it was hard for her to control herself. But first, she was a woman, and after her husband died, it was inevitable that she would feel lonely. Second, the man was tall and muscular, making it hard for her to control herself. But this wasn't against the law. There was no law in the Western Wasteland that said a widowed woman couldn't occasionally steal a few bites. Meat and vegetables really weren't good enough, and it was hard to eat salt and oil. Chapter 16:10. Luckily, the methods of the military interrogators weren't something that ordinary officials could compare with. It was unknown what sort of trick they used to touch this woman's sore spot. Women might be stubborn, but once they gave themselves away, their mentality would collapse even more. In a fit of anger, she blurted out many things. She didn't even miss out on the several times they had made love with each other. The two interrogators, who were sitting opposite her and listening to her in detail, had cold expressions on their faces. They didn't have any intention of interrupting her and only stopped when she spoke until her throat was smoking. According to what this woman said, she had taken the initiative to seduce that man from the military named Gao Yu after receiving a large sum of money. As time passed, the two of them became entangled together. TSK, this woman is really interesting. I like her. After organizing the questions, the two interrogators turned and left. After they left the room, one of them slowly spoke up. Even though his face was still cold, his eyes were blazing with passion. The other interrogator frowned. He reminded him, "This woman is now one of the key points. Don't touch her. Don't worry, I won't be so stupid as to seek my own death. Even if I covet her body, I will wait until this matter comes to an end." The other interrogator thought for a moment and nodded, no longer saying anything. They had done similar things many times before. As long as they were careful, there wouldn't be any trouble. Following that, they captured the person who had given the money to this woman. This matter didn't go smoothly. That fellow named Wang Kai seemed to have sensed something and fled ahead of time. The interrogators sealed off the Wang family. After a careful investigation, they found a breakthrough on a maid. They captured Wang Kai, who was hiding in a courtyard within Ironthorn City. This fellow was quite straightforward. He said that he wanted to develop the industry left behind by his ancestors in order to curry favor with the nobles in the military. So, when he found out that Gao Yu was a guard at Commander Gao Yu's tent, he sent money to that woman in the restaurant. Both sides cooperated, and each took what they needed. The interrogators used various methods, and the answer was always the same. Wang Kai, who was in so much pain that he didn't even look like a human anymore, clenched his teeth and said, "Don't torture me. Just tell me who you want me to bite. I will definitely agree." At this point, they really couldn't use torture anymore. Otherwise, even if they obtained results later on, they would attract trouble. The investigation reached a deadlock once again. The breakthrough came from the maidservant of the Wang family. Perhaps it was because she had betrayed the Wang family and believed that she had no chance of survival, so she was afraid of being retaliated against. She gave an important clue. Wang Kai had a half-sister who had come to the Wang family in her early years. She was dressed well and had guards by her side. The words armored guards were used well. They were precise and inconspicuous. The interrogator glanced at this rather beautiful maid who must have crawled into Wang Kai's bed a long time ago. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. His intuition told him that there was a problem, but after thinking about it, he just recorded the information in a book and did not continue to investigate. Since they were ordered to investigate the assassination of the Marquis of Loyal Marshal Ning Qin, it was best not to complicate matters. After all, although the interrogators in the army were directly under the Empire's military headquarters and were not under the control of the border army camp, they were not under the control of the border army camp, but under the eaves of others. If they didn't want to be blown by the wind and beaten by the rain, they didn't want to inexplicably lose their lives one day. They had to be flexible when necessary. After reporting to the commander's tent, the interrogators continued to investigate. Wang Kai's half-sister was quickly found after a thorough investigation. Her identity was indeed not ordinary. She was the beloved concubine of the Roaring Tiger Army's deputy general of the Western Border Army camp. As for the Roaring Tiger Army, it had been many years. Ever since Yi Sangdu entered the Western Border Army camp, he had always been one of his direct subordinates. These past years, he had carefully managed the army. From top to bottom, he could be said to be a trusted aide of the great general. As for this Deputy General Su Zhou, he was also known to be a trusted aide of the Yi family. The commander's tent fell deathly silent. Yi Sangdu's complexion paled. He clenched his teeth and roared, "This matter has nothing to do with me. I asked the great general to investigate." The shock and anger he showed didn't seem to be fake. But when one's acting skills reached a transcendent level, it was difficult to determine whether it was real or fake. Qin Yu lowered his head and drank his tea. His eyes flashed. Of everyone present today, Yi Sangda's background had already determined that he was indeed the one who wished for Qin Yu to die here the most. But for some reason, his intuition told him that Yi Sangda's current appearance wasn't fake. Who exactly was the assassin working for? Wu Tongtian was expressionless. "Great General, there is no need to be angry. The interrogators have only found some clues. Perhaps all of this is just a coincidence. Let them continue to investigate. Perhaps the truth will come to light, and we can give the great general an explanation." Yi Sangda's heart skipped a beat. He looked up at the calm Wu Tongtian and felt a chill run down his spine. After receiving the commander's order, the interrogators rushed towards the Roaring Tiger Army. Deputy General Su Zhou ordered his guards to withdraw. He looked at the interrogators with a calm expression. I can go with you, but this matter has nothing to do with me. The interrogators bowed. General Su, rest assured that we will investigate this thoroughly. We won't make any rash decisions. But for now, I ask that you come with us first. Suzhou nodded, his expression calm. Very well. He turned and ordered his subordinates to maintain order in the army and not cause any trouble. In the commander's tent, Yi Sangdu stood up and left. In his words, since he was suspected, it wasn't appropriate for him to stay here any longer. He should return to his own tent and wait for the results. Wu Tongtian didn't stop him. Watching Yi Sangdu leave, at this time, in the depths of the general's eyes, there were some emotional changes. Suppressing his emotions, Yi Sangdu calmly left the commander's tent. He could feel these gazes coming from behind him. He became increasingly annoyed, but he acted as if he didn't feel anything. He strode back to his tent. He had to investigate as soon as possible. He had to find out whether or not Suzhou was truly involved. Today, Wu Tongtian gave him an extremely bad feeling. If something really happened to him, the consequences would be unimaginable. In the great general's tent, there were already trusted aides anxiously waiting. Seeing Yi Sangdu return, they were overjoyed. They hurried forwards and bowed. Great General, what should we do? Suzhou has already been exposed. I fear something big is about to happen. Yi Sangdu's complexion paled as he glared at them. Seeing this expression, the aide's heart shrank. He said with a trembling voice, Does the great general not know the inside story? At this time, Yi Sangdu wanted to strangle this aide to death. He clenched his teeth and roared out, Just what is going on here? The aide's complexion paled, and he tottered. Looking at the great general's eyes that seemed as if they could eat him alive, he knew that if he fainted now, he wouldn't be able to wake up again. He slapped himself in the face and forcefully raised his spirits. Great General, 14 years ago, it was Mr. Second who personally looked for me and arranged for Gao Yu, a chess piece of the previous dynasty. Because this is an important matter, there are very few people who know of this matter. After I finished, I reported back. The great general personally told me that he understood. Otherwise, how could I have dared to make such a decision on my own? Li Sangdu's thoughts raced. He had a photographic memory. As a cultivator, he was able to quickly find some memories from 14 years ago. He closed his eyes, his complexion becoming increasingly ugly. Back then, I was misled by him and thought that you were doing something else. Men, go and ask Mr. Second to come over. I want to ask him why he did this. For him to be fooled by someone and casually use one of his subordinates to create a plot against him. The premise was that Li Sangdu had enough trust in this Mr. Second. And in truth, when he left the imperial capital and rushed to the border army, he hadn't done anything wrong in all these years. This was mostly because of Mr. Second's schemes. Thinking of this, Li Sangdu was startled and filled with dread. He felt a chill seep out from the depths of his heart, so much so that even his blood seemed to freeze. The guards outside the tent received orders and left in a hurry. They soon returned, but all they brought back was an ice-cold corpse. Great General, when I arrived, Mr. Second had already committed suicide. This is the letter he left for you. Li Sangdu looked at the calm and familiar face in front of him. He thought back to several days ago when he was dealing with Marquis Loyalty, Marquis Ningqin, and the two of them had a conversation. At that time, Mr. Second hadn't revealed any abnormalities at all. He had calmly communicated with him and made many suggestions. For instance, he had told him to wait and see for the time being. He couldn't recklessly attack Marquis Loyalty Marquis because he was under pressure from the imperial capital. At that time, Li Sangdu never imagined that the Mr. Second in front of him, who he respected so much, would have already buried a great calamity for him 14 years ago. Li Sangdu picked up the letter and tore open the seal. After glancing at it several times, his complexion became increasingly pale. On the letter was written in a terrified scrawl. He admitted that he had made a great mistake and didn't dare to accept military punishment. He could only choose to commit suicide to escape, and so on and so forth. He clenched his fists, and the letter crumbled to dust. But Li Sangda knew that Mr. Second had used his own life to bite him to death. It didn't matter whether or not he had this letter. But even so, before Mr. Second committed suicide, he still wrote this letter. Li Sangdu's fingers trembled as he looked up. Go and see Suzhou. Tell him to insist on this matter. Halfway through his words, he froze. He thought of Mr. Second's level. If he was nothing more than a chess piece that could be casually discarded, then how could the person playing this game give him a chance? It's too late, it's too late. He muttered to himself, his face dejected. Li Sangdu's guess was correct. Suzhou, who had been invited into the interrogation tent, didn't even have time to show off his courage before he was directly detained. He desperately resisted. He angrily roared, "How dare you? I am a deputy general of the Tiger Roar Army. How dare you torture me in private? I will definitely investigate this matter to the end and make you suffer the consequences." The several interrogators who captured him had pitiful looks on their faces. They looked at this general in front of them who was speaking such ruthless words. These gazes caused Suzhou to frown. His complexion quickly paled and his body shivered. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. An interrogator said in a soft voice, "General Su, you should know the strength of us interrogators. If there is no evidence, how could we dare to do anything to you?" He shook his head and sighed. In this world, the most poisonous thing is a woman's heart. In your next life, you should open your eyes wide. Hearing these words, Suzhou felt as if his spine had been broken. He lost all of his vitality and slumped to the ground. Wang Kai's half-sister knelt in the corner of the dungeon. She kowtowed, tears streaming down her face. "Mother, mother, your daughter has finally avenged you. No one in the Wang family will escape. If you know this in the afterlife, you can rest in peace." Chapter 16:11. Within the commander tent, the atmosphere was extremely heavy. Although everyone had a foreboding premonition when Li Sangdu left halfway, when all the evidence was found, they still found it hard to believe, as well as a chill that surged out from the depths of their hearts. It wasn't because Yi Sangdu dared to order an assassin to kill Marquis Zhongwu, Ning Qin, but because today's events had gone far too smoothly. Although the army's interrogators were indeed the group of people that excelled at such private matters, their efficiency was so high that they were likely feeling a chill in their hearts, or perhaps they were cursing out loud. After all, to be used as a killing knife, especially against Yi Sangdu, wasn't something that made anyone happy. But these thoughts could only be suppressed in the depths of their hearts. This was because the chain of evidence was sufficient and conclusive. Li Sangdu was the instigator behind the scenes, ordering the remnants of the previous dynasty to act as assassins to kill Marquis Zhongwu outside the commander's tent. Whether or not this matter succeeded, if it wasn't handled properly, it would cause turmoil in the border army. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Qin Yu's intentions were sinister. This was a truly great crime. Wu Tongtian took a deep breath and slowly said, "This matter is of great importance. Before the imperial capital makes a decision, I ask everyone to keep their mouths shut and not reveal a single word to anyone." He paused for a moment and then continued, "I will personally step forward to suppress the situation. Great General, please come to my tent and wait for the arrival of an angel." His words were like a final verdict. No one in the commander's tent was in the mood to watch the fun. Great General Yi Sangdu was finished, although the seat was indeed empty. As they looked up at the solemn and emotionless Wu Shuai, their hearts filled with fear. In the current Western Border Army camp, those that could strike down Yi Sangdu without giving him the slightest chance to struggle were only Wu Tongtian and the silent Marquis Zhongwu. But because of time constraints, Marquis Zhongwu had been excluded from the crowd from the very beginning. Therefore, the one who had plotted for many years and defeated the dignified Yi family, the number 2 general of the Western Border Army, could only be Wu Tongtian. But why? In these past years, Wu Shuai's attitude had always been ambiguous, and he had a close relationship with the Yi family. Although the later Yi family was showing signs of being shaken by a storm, their foundation was still strong. Wu Shuai's actions were no different from shedding all pretense of cordiality. Even though he was the commander-in-chief of a border army, doing something like this was a bit too risky. Moreover, His Majesty in the Imperial Palace had always disliked Wu Tongtian. This was an almost open secret in the Western Wilderness Army. Now that His Majesty had stabilized the situation in the capital and obtained the extension of 100 years, what Wu Tongtian should do was to hug the Yi family and strive to survive this period of cold winter. He should not stab His Majesty in the back and try to change his opinion. After all, 100 years was a long life for mortals. But for grand cultivators who had almost reached the peak of the mountain, it was not a matter of flicking their fingers, but at most 4 or 5 flicks. Their future was still promising. Everyone couldn't understand what was going on. They felt that Wu Tongtian's actions were a bit of a miscalculation and muddle-headed, but it didn't lessen their fear in the slightest. Yi Sang had already said what he wanted. If it was them, if Wu Tongtian brazenly made a move, who would be better off? Marquis Zhongwu, this matter has come to an end for now. Are you satisfied? Wu Tongtian slowly said, a tired look on his face. It seemed he had exhausted a great deal of his mind today. Qin put down his teacup. He cupped his hands together. Commander-in-Chief is wise and fair. I am very satisfied. He stood up. I will leave everything to Commander-in-Chief to decide. I have 400,000 men under my command, and they are still in the mines without a place to stay. I will not stay any longer and will bid my farewells first. Wu Tongtian nodded. Marquis Zhongwu can calculate the costs of building the camp and send a number to the Commander-in-Chief's tent. Qin smiled. Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. He turned and walked out of the tent. Today seemed like a glorious day, but thinking about it, there were many interesting things. He had come with the momentum of a thunderstorm to demand an explanation from the Commander-in-Chief. Although the final result was good, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that he had been used as a knife in someone else's hand. He was a bit unhappy and a bit afraid, but he was even more satisfied. After all, pushing down Yi Sangdu was a good thing for Qin no matter how he looked at it. Thinking about it, Wu Tongtian had already calculated all of this. He knew that Qin would be willing to cooperate and wouldn't jump out to mess with him. That was why he said those last words just now, which could be considered as giving him some face. Marquis Zhongwu, wait a moment. A shout came from behind him. Zhao Chong hurriedly chased after him, a smile on his face. I haven't had the chance to congratulate Lord Marquis on his promotion. Why are you leaving so soon? I've just obtained a pot of good tea in my tent. Marquis, you must come and have a taste. You must not refuse. Now that there are so many people watching, I will lose face. At this point, it seemed like Zhao Chong had truly been frightened by the commotion in the commander's tent today. Although Qin didn't care about Zhao Chong's face, he still nodded after thinking about it. That's fine. Everything about Marshall's tent is good, but the tea for guests is a bit lacking. Let's go to General Zhao's tent and drink some tea before leaving. Zhao Chong was overjoyed. He gestured with his hand. Marquis, do me the honor. Please. His attitude was extremely humble. As they spoke, Qin mostly responded and didn't say much. As for this General Zhao, he was indeed a wonderful person. From time to time he would laugh and even gather his courage to pat Qin Yu's shoulder, as if they were very close. He wished that everyone in the camp could see this with their own eyes. After entering the tent, Zhao Chong waved his hands to dismiss his attendants. Zhao Chong personally brewed a pot of tea and poured it 80% full for Qin Yu. He placed it in front of him. I was only doing this to protect myself. I hope you don't mind me for borrowing Lord Marquis' banner. Qin Yu faintly smiled. He felt that this Zhao Chong was more and more interesting. He could even lower his head and admit his mistakes without any hesitation. Thinking for a moment, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. General Zhao, just what do you want to say? Say it now. I really only want a cup of tea. A moment later, Zhao Chong smiled and personally saw Qin Yu off. He stood at the entrance of the tent and waved his hand. It wasn't until Qin Yu's back vanished from sight that he turned back. His personal guards Wang Dadu and the others were waiting not too far away from the tent. As they saw their general arrive, they hurried to greet him. Qin glanced at them and smiled. Come, let's return to the mine. He sat in the carriage and comfortably leaned against the soft couch. Qin let out a deep breath, a thoughtful look in his eyes. When he was in Zhao Chang's tent, he had straightforwardly expressed that he was willing to follow Qin Yu's lead in the future. He only hoped that the Marquis would allow him to join them so that he could shelter them from the wind and rain in the future. Although Qin Yu appreciated Zhao Chang's decisiveness, he was still one of the top-ranked generals of the border army. This sort of behavior was a bit too impatient and crude, and it would be appropriate to say that it was beneath his status. However, after leaving the tent, Qin Yu's thoughts raced, and he guessed what was going on. Zhao Chong had hurriedly rushed out of the tent, not even caring about his face. The reason he had pulled him over to drink a cup of tea. Zhao Chong guessed that Wu Tong Tian was one of His Majesty's people. No one was an idiot. If Wu Tong Tian was able to sit in the barracks of the Western Border Army and command the millions upon millions of soldiers of the Empire, he was naturally one of the smartest people in the world. His cultivation wasn't just for show. So, although it seemed like he was brainless and muddle-headed, this betrayal of a friend for glory, stabbing a knife in the back in an attempt to obtain His Majesty's approval, there had to be a deeper meaning behind it. If Wu Tong Tian had always been one of His Majesty's people, then all of this could be explained in a reasonable manner. The so-called ruler and minister disliking each other was nothing more than a play that had been played out for many years. Because both sides had superb acting skills, they had fooled everyone. Now that His Majesty had made it clear that he wanted to move against the Yi family, it was only natural that Wu Tong Tian would act as the vanguard and take down Yi Sang. This was why Zhao Chong was so impatient to obtain Qin Yu's protection, because he was also one of His Majesty's people. In other words, according to Zhao Chong's guess, after Yi Sang fell, the number 1 Wu Tong Tian and number 2 Marquis, loyal marshal, were fellow disciples of the same sect. In the future, if they wanted to deal with someone or send someone to hell, wouldn't that be a matter of a single word? Within the carriage, Qin Yu let out a long breath. He rubbed his temples. He had to admit that what Zhao Chong was thinking was indeed a possibility. From the very start, the Western Wasteland Great Emperor had never trusted him. This was already certain. Thus, it was possible that he had concealed Wu Tongtian's true background from Qin Yu so that he could secretly monitor and impede him. Qin Yu had smoothly passed the test of the Noble South and Golden Millet realms. Although his memories were blurry, he could at least confirm this. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to safely arrive at the border army barracks. Thus, if Wu Tongtian really did act this time on the orders of the Western Wasteland Great Emperor, then, once the dust settled, he should have taken the initiative to come and inform Qin Yu. Shaking his head, Qin Yu no longer thought about this. To him, it wasn't important who Wu Tongtian was. After all, the identity he had now was fake. In addition, the Western Wasteland Great Emperor had always been wary of him for some unknown reason. Perhaps there would come a day when Qin Yu would be forced to flee. Thinking about this was useless. It was better to cultivate. Otherwise, when the time came, he wouldn't be able to run away even if he wanted to. Thus, after sorting out his thoughts, Qin Yu closed his eyes and sat down cross-legged. Outside the carriage, Wang Datu and the others felt the changes in the Marquis's aura. They all revealed looks of admiration. They thought that their Marquis was truly someone with a thumbs up. With his current status and cultivation, he still cultivated so painstakingly, not wasting any time at all. Compared to the Marquis, us lowly and lowly peasants in the border army are just wasting away our time. We deserve to be slapped in the face. Wang Data took a deep breath. He turned his head, his dark eyes sweeping over the people around him. His gaze paused on his nephew Wang San for a moment. He lowered his voice and said, "Once we return to the mine and hand over the task, I will personally urge you all to work hard in your cultivation. Otherwise, even if the Marquis thinks highly of us, I fear we won't have the face to accept him if he continues to make us his personal guards." Everyone had bitter expressions. They thought back to when the Marquis had faced 2 assassinations in the imperial capital and then outside the commander's tent. They hadn't played any role at all and had been nothing more than decorations. They all revealed ashamed expressions and nodded. They clenched their teeth. For better or worse, they had to work hard. Even if they couldn't help the Marquis stand on his own, they had to at least be like the 2 fourth claws that had died in the palace. When the enemy arrived, they could help the Marquis resist a bit. Chapter 16:12. Mind Cave. After arranging arrangements for the 400,000 soldiers, Chinyu let out a long breath. He thought that being a person of status was also a tiring matter. Luckily, his ambition wasn't to be a qualified general. He just needed to deal with everything that came his way, but he needed to do his best. True Saint Baitu was a good choice. He had the bloodline of an imperial family and was the nephew of the Skyborn King. He was an elite that had been carefully raised since he was a child. If he wasn't properly ordered around, it would be a waste. Chinyu called him over and gave him a few instructions. Then, without giving him a chance to refute or struggle, he waved his hand and sent him away. As True Saint Baitu walked out, he rubbed his face. Just what was going on? The Mind Cave had an army of 600,000 soldiers, and yet they were handing over the daily chores to him? He looked down at the still-warm Marquis, loyal Marshal's letter of acceptance. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Temporary Military Affairs Counselor. Marquis, are you sure that there is such a strange official position in the Western Desolate Border Army? It was fine if he wanted to slack off, but for better or worse, he had to put in some effort. As he thought of all the things he would have to do next, he wanted to pull out his hair. After dealing with True Saint Baitu, Chinyu was in a good mood. He continued to cultivate, but he was also hesitant about taking a trip to the Mind Cave. After thinking for a moment, Chinyu shook his head. He wouldn't be able to hide from her sooner or later. Since he had to let her know, he had to do it sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sincere enough. Chinyu stood up and walked towards the rear courtyard of the mansion. After news of his promotion to Marquis Loyal Marshal was sent back to the Mind Cave, the army stationed there had clearly made plans for the mansion and expanded it. The scale was several times larger than before, and it was even more luxurious. For instance, there were sun essence stones embedded into the stone walls that acted as suns. Each one was the size of a millstone, and they shined in all directions, revealing the style of an immortal cave dwelling. Of course, it was impossible for the peasants of the border army to find such good things. But not too long ago, the high-spirited Jodafu had brought several of his trusted subordinates back to the border army from the imperial capital. When he learned that the mine guards were preparing to open up a mansion for the Marquis, he immediately took over. It was not a secret that the Marquis was involved in smuggling with the barbarians. The border soldiers in the mine were used to this and did not find it hard to accept. After confirming Zhou Dafu's identity, he accepted them with a face full of smiles. Later on, he realized that it was indeed right to leave professional matters to professionals. In terms of enjoyment and luxury, Zhou Dafu was a master. Of previously, when Zhou Dafu paid his respects to Chinyu, he was extremely respectful and offered him a storage ring with both hands. Inside the ring was Chinyu's share of the smuggled goods from last time. Of course, it was 30% more than usual. Moreover, Zhou Dafu paid for the construction of the mansion out of his own pocket. He was now fawning over Chinyu, wishing that he could tie himself to the Marquis's thigh. In the end, it was because Zhou Dafu and the others had witnessed the true might and tyrannical might of the Zhongwu Marquis. Originally, they had been trembling in fear, worried that the great figures of the imperial capital would kill them in a fit of anger. But when they saw them, their attitudes were so good that they didn't even try to make things difficult for them. Instead, they easily separated the matter from the past. From now on, the mountains were high and the rivers were wide. They no longer needed to tremble in fear as if they were treading on thin ice. While they were ecstatic, there was also a bit more awe in their hearts. Such a thigh was placed in front of them, so why didn't they hurry up and grab onto it? Had their brains rusted, or had they been kicked by a donkey? The smart Zhou Dafu certainly wouldn't do something so stupid. However, the mansion was too large, and the disadvantage was that it took time to walk. After all, it wasn't good to use supernatural powers to travel back and forth at home. As for Chinyu, this trip had delayed his cultivation. He silently thought about how much cultivation time he had wasted. As he looked at the mansion in front of him, he wasn't in a good mood. At the same time, he had a much worse impression of that Zhou Dafu who had nearly clung onto his thigh and flattered him. In all honesty, Zhou Dafu dared to slap his chest and swear that when he built this mansion, he put even more effort into it than when he bought a mansion for his father and mother. If he knew that he had ended up in such a miserable state because of Chinyu, he feared he would have cried out in aggrievement. The residence that Little Meat had chosen was the largest and most magnificent one in the backyard. There was a sun essence stone that was as big as 2 millstones embedded in the ceiling. Under the illumination of the stone, the entire place shone with brilliant colors. It truly displayed the grandeur of a noble clan. Chinyu stepped in. The maids bowed and bowed. His eyes swept over a white robe, and he waved his hand. "You may all leave." The maids bowed and excused themselves. Baiji was the last to leave. She glanced at Chinyu. Little Meat was drinking tea and eating the exquisite pastries on her plate. When everyone left, she looked up at Chinyu. "What are you looking for me for? I just rested for a day or two. Can't you calm down a bit?" Chinyu rubbed his nose. He couldn't blame Little Meat for having such a bad attitude. It was just as she said, most of the time he came here, nothing good would come out of it. He would always add to her troubles. He lightly coughed and said, "The reason I came here this time is to take you to a place of course. I might need some suggestions from you." Little Meat glanced at Chinyu. Her eyes were bright, as if she could see through his heart. She finished eating the pastries in her hands and then lifted a foot to step on the ground. Chinyu thought to himself that he had expected this. He nodded. Little Meat licked the corners of her lips. Seeing her actions, Chinyu inexplicably felt flustered. He suddenly felt a bit of regret. The decision he made just now, could it be that he had let a wolf in the house? Humph! Little Meat coldly sneered. She clenched her teeth. Leading a wolf into the house? I didn't think you would have such literary talent, Chinyu. To use this phrase here, I have to say, it really is quite appropriate. Chinyu felt a headache coming on. He quickly suppressed these thoughts. No, it was just a subconscious thought. Sometimes these things really can't be controlled. What sort of relationship do we have? Of course, I have complete confidence in you. Little Meat coldly sneered. She lowered her head and drank some tea. Forget it. I think it's best if I don't take this trip. I don't want you to worry about me in the future and suspect me over and over again. Chinyu stood up and grabbed her hand. He turned and walked outside. Don't. I admit my mistake. I have no conscience. Miss Little Meat, a great person like you will forgive me. Little Meat's eyebrows arched up. She looked down and saw Chinyu grabbing her hand. He coldly snorted, but his eyes softened. After half refusing and half agreeing, she was pulled away by Chinyu. They left the mansion and casually chose a tunnel. Without alerting anyone, they flashed in. In the pitch-black underground, the tunnels extended in all directions. The two of them continued downwards, passing through countless crisscrossing tunnels that seemed like a maze. Luckily, Chinyu had a feeling in his heart, so he didn't need to think about anything. Finally, they arrived at the Ghost Fog Grotto. Chinyu let go of her hand. He turned and smiled. We've arrived. Little Meat grunted. She tried to keep her voice as calm as possible, not revealing any of her inner emotions. Chinyu glanced at her, feeling a little strange. Before he could think about it, Little Meat coldly sneered. What are you doing? What a waste of time. This was Little Meat's normal state. Chinyu reached out a hand and gestured. Miss Little Meat, please follow me. He stepped inside. The moment Little Meat entered, a great panic rose up in Chinyu's mind. In the next moment, the space and time laws within the grotto fell into a berserk state. It was like a sea in a storm, chaotic and disorderly. Chapter 16:13. Chinyu sucked in a deep breath. He turned to look at Little Meaty. She rolled her eyes, not speaking, but her eyes were clearly saying, Are you blaming me for being timid? Cough. Chinyu lifted a hand and pressed forwards. The wild space and time laws soon returned to tranquility. The fog vanished, and the heaven and earth spirit embryo appeared in front of the two. But it had lost all of its aura and all of its spirituality. It looked just like a very ordinary stone. Of course, Chinyu knew that this was only a facade after being frightened. He stepped forwards and patted it. Don't be afraid. Little Meaty is one of us. She won't hurt you. The heaven and earth spirit embryo remained deathly still. Little Meaty coldly sneered. If you don't want to come out, then I'll do it myself. With a loud crack, a ball of light fell to the ground, sprawled out on the ground. Then it crawled back up and hid behind Chinyu. Surprisingly, it was a little person that was around a foot tall. Looking carefully, this little person was 70 to 80% similar to Chinyu. It was just that as its body shrank, its skin was soft and tender, making it seem like it was carved from jade. It was extremely cute. At this time, its face was filled with fear. It hugged Chinyu's calf with both hands, looking even more pitiful. Little Meaty narrowed her eyes and then composed herself. Chinyu, although most of the debt between us has been erased, it still hasn't been paid off. Do you still remember? The little person that was hugging Chinyu's calf shivered as he heard this. His eyes popped out of his head, and he vigorously shook his head. Chinyu hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Yes. Little Meaty pointed a finger. As for the rest of the debt, I'll have this little thing pay it off for you. In any case, the two of you are essentially the same. The little person immediately began to cry. Chinyu revealed a look of unwillingness. But before he could speak, he was interrupted by Little Meaty. I am the creditor, so I have the final say. Moreover, I already know what you want to say. If you agree to this matter, then I will agree to help you. Although this was a bit of a tongue twister, Chinyu immediately understood Little Meaty's meaning. His eyes brightened. The little person's cries became even louder and more pitiful, making it hard to bear. Frowning, Chinyu said, Can you guarantee that you won't hurt? Meaty sneered, interrupting him. I can't. She glanced at Chinyu, and his frown deepened. She impatiently said, Don't worry. He won't die, and his foundation won't be damaged. Do you agree or not? Otherwise, I will go back on my word. Chinyu thought for a moment and slowly nodded. If Little Meaty really wanted to harm the heaven and earth spirit embryo little person, there was no way he could stop her. In other words, there was no need to make things so troublesome. Seeing Chinyu's stance, the little person wiped away his tears, a resigned expression on his face. He closed his eyes and began to sob. Rest assured, Little Meat is our friend. You've suffered today. In the future, I will think of a way to compensate you. Chinyu let out a long breath and turned to leave. As he left the ghost fog grotto, a seal suddenly appeared, isolating all perception. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows and turned his head. He felt that there was something wrong with Little Meaty's current actions. After Chinyu left the ghost fog grotto, there was only Little Meaty and the foot-tall little person left behind. The little person's eyes were still closed, and he was quietly sobbing. Tears constantly fell down his face, and his body shivered in fear. Little Meaty narrowed her eyes, and the sneer on her face vanished, turning into indifference. All right, he has already left. Who else do you want to act for? The foot-tall little person looked up, an aggrieved and puzzled expression on his face. His large red eyes blinked, as if he were the embodiment of innocence. Little Meaty had no expression. I'll be frank with you. If you continue to play the pitiful part, little thing, do you really want to die? The little person wiped away his tears and let out a deep breath. Your aura is too terrifying. I'm the weaker one to begin with, so it isn't too much for me to play the weak and win some sympathy, right? Of course, if you don't like it, then let's talk nicely. He rolled over and landed on the ground, respectfully bowing. Greetings, Your Excellency. Little Meaty coldly sneered. Then guess what I'm going to do next? The little person frowned, deep in thought. Are you worried that I will harm the main body in the future? Little Meaty said, You're smart. The little person bitterly smiled. Your Excellency is thinking too much. I was born from a soul fragment of the main body, and I share life and death with him. Everything I do is based on his will, so I would never do such a thing. Oh, is that so? The little person seemed to feel some sort of terrifying aura. With a panic-stricken expression, he instantly vanished. In the next moment, the space in front of little Meaty suddenly shattered, revealing the panic-stricken little person within. Little Meaty reached out a hand and grabbed his neck. Her expression was cold and indifferent. "Little thing, it looks like you really want to die." The little person screamed. "You promised the main body that you wouldn't kill me." Little Meaty's fingers slowly tightened. "I promised, but if I change my mind now, what can you do about it?" The little person's face flushed red. He desperately struggled. "Why won't you believe me? I was just born and I never had any thoughts of plotting against the main body or replacing him." A smile suddenly appeared on little Meaty's face. "Replacing? That's a very good word. You are indeed worthy of being a person. Your literary skills are quite good." Her smile faded. She pulled the little person in front of her so that their eyes were almost touching. "It seems that you still don't understand just what sort of existence is standing in front of you. As for me, my understanding of you far surpasses your imagination. After all, in this world, there are no harvests that don't require a price. The so-called meat pies that fall from the heavens are likely to have something added to them." The little person stopped struggling. His expression became as indifferent as little Meaty's. His eyes were calm, without any fear. "You don't dare to kill me." Little Meaty nodded. "That's right. If I kill you, I will be in trouble. But I can seal you away so that you can only forever be a white lotus or a crybaby. Can you guess whether or not I can do this?" The little person's face collapsed, and he began to cry. "I believe you. I believe you. Just what do you want to do? Even if you chose my main body first, I won't fight with you for it." "Pa!" With a heavy slap, half of the little person's face instantly swelled up. 5 clear finger marks could be seen. "It looks like you are incredibly stupid. Even now, you still haven't been able to understand my meaning. Remember, Chinyu is your main body. He is one of my people. If you dare to touch him in the slightest, I will make you wish you were dead." Little Meaty licked the corners of her lips. She completely sealed herself away and suddenly revealed a trace of her aura. The little person that had been slapped suddenly widened his eyes. He struggled with his hands and feet. It's you. Little Meaty slowly said, "Now, do you understand?" The little person desperately nodded. Little Meaty gulped. "Since you understand, then let's proceed to the next step. Let's settle the accounts. Your main body still owes me a great deal. Let me calculate how we'll pay you back." She suddenly grabbed the little person's arm and tore it off. As she watched him howl in pain, she casually tossed the arm into her mouth, chewed it several times, and swallowed it. Her eyes turned incomparably hot. This taste was wonderful to the extreme. She nearly couldn't restrain the violence in her heart and wanted to eat him up. Chinyu's complexion paled. He could clearly feel the pain and fear transmitted from the little person. His feet moved, and then he abruptly stopped. He stared at the entrance of the ghost fog cave, his expression grim. After thinking about it again and again, Chinyu took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the restlessness in his heart. He stood still where he was. Since he had chosen to bring Little Meaty here, he had to give her enough trust. Otherwise, it would only backfire. Luckily, after this, there was no other horrifying feeling. He could only faintly feel that the little person was in a panic-stricken state. A moment later, the entrance to the cave flashed, and Little Meaty walked out. Behind her was an extremely pale youth. He looked 11 or 12 years old. His lips were red and his teeth were white. He wore a white robe and was incomparably handsome, like an immortal that had fallen to the mortal world. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows, a bit confused. Little Meaty said, "I've already spoken with him. This boy is willing to run errands for you and go to the Western Desolate to give it a try. But it's hard to say whether or not he can smoothly arrange it." She looked at Chinyu, and her lips curved up in a smug smile. "I can see through your little thoughts with a single strand of hair." The white-robed youth walked out and bowed. "I ask Master to bestow me a name." As he spoke, His expression was extremely respectful and calm, but only he knew just how much he was gnashing his teeth in his heart. His name wasn't something that could be casually given. Once he asked for it on his own initiative, that would be the same as his true name being known by others. There would be great hidden dangers. Moreover, this name was given by Chinyu. In the future, he couldn't have any other thoughts. Otherwise, he would be courting death. Chinyu looked at little Meaty and nodded. Although he didn't know the truth, he thought for a moment and said, "White clothes like feathers, fluttering like an immortal. From now on, you'll be called Chinyu." The white-robed youth seemed as if he had been struck by lightning. He fiercely looked up at Chinyu. After several breaths of time, he began to cry out loud, incomparably heartbroken. Little Meaty was stunned. She glanced at Chinyu, a sharp light flashing in the depths of her eyes. Chinyu helplessly said, "If you don't like the name, you can change it. There's no need to do this, right?" Little Meaty waved her hand. "No, this name is very good. Chinyu, the same sound but different characters. There is nothing better than this. I think that Chinyu must be overjoyed to obtain this name. That's why he's crying tears of joy." Although the white-robed Chinyu vigorously nodded, Chinyu still felt that the atmosphere was too strange. But he glanced at Little Meaty and didn't say anything. Like this, the name was decided. Little Meaty glared at Chinyu. "What are you standing around for? Give him the materials. This boy has just refined his human form, so he must leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, if the world senses tribulation thunder and falls down, there will be nothing left to hide." Chinyu nodded again and again, no longer caring about crying. Chinyu took out all the remaining materials in his hands. He only kept 2 portions just in case and gave the rest to Little Meaty. "Farewell, master." Chinyu knelt on the ground and respectfully kowtowed. Then he turned and stepped away, vanishing from sight. Chinyu revealed a look of surprise. He was well aware that Chinyu had no cultivation at all and was just an ordinary person, yet he was able to travel through space. Little Meaty coldly sneered. A life form born from a heavenly spirit embryo is naturally different from others. What is so strange about that? She lifted a hand and flicked a finger. A pained cry immediately rang out. "If you dare to peep again, I will dig out your eyes and make you blind." The pained cry faded away. Chinyu discovered that Little Meaty's complexion had suddenly paled. Her body swayed, and she seemed a bit unsteady. He hurried forwards and grabbed her. "What is going on?" Little Meaty clenched her teeth. She nearly cursed out loud. "What is going on? If it weren't for you, I almost couldn't control the situation. If I had failed, you would have known what it meant to be someone else's clothes." But as she thought about these words, she didn't say them. She rubbed her temples and said, "I'm fine. Send me back to rest." Chinyu took a deep breath. "Okay." Passing through the darkness, the 2 of them left the mine and quietly returned to the residence. Little Meaty's complexion was still pale. She poured herself a cup of tea and gulped it down. Then she looked up at Chinyu and said, "If I don't leave, what else can I do? I'm really tired, so don't bother me anymore." Chinyu's lips twitched. He thought that her words were a bit inappropriate. He took a deep breath and said, "Rest well." He turned and walked out. After taking 2 steps, he stopped and said, "What did you do underground just now?" Little Meaty furrowed her eyebrows. But as she looked at Chinyu's earnest expression, she fell silent for a moment and said, "I just wanted that little thing to remember better and not have any thoughts she shouldn't have." Chinyu cupped his hands together and bowed. "Thank you." He turned and walked away. Chapter 16:14. Although Little Meaty had casually mentioned it, her expression afterwards indicated that this matter wasn't so simple. He had discovered the heaven and earth spirit embryo and smoothly planted his soul within it. When it finally sprouted, he never imagined that it would be a blessing and a curse. Luckily, he was willing to explain things to Little Meaty on his own initiative. He had shown enough trust in her. And luckily, Little Meaty was by his side. Otherwise, it was hard to imagine just how far this matter would have developed. Looking at Chinyu's back, Little Meaty's lips twitched. She had a look of disdain and dissatisfaction. She thought that all he did was talk and no action at all. However, the expression in her eyes softened, revealing a hint of joy that even she herself didn't notice. Bad luck, really bad luck. I thought that after so many years of suffering, I would finally be able to make a breakthrough. But who would have thought that I would run into a pair of demonic female and male demons and be thrown into the sea of bitterness? I have no idea how many years it will be before I can find a chance to return to shore. Or will I be suppressed for the rest of my life without a chance to rise again? As the white-robed youth who had been bestowed the name of Qin Yu thought of this, tears began to well up in his eyes. He felt a river of sorrow that he couldn't suppress. He couldn't help but lift a hand and wipe away his tears. He sobbed, "I watched for so long. If you didn't come out, I would have run away." Space twisted and a figure appeared out of thin air. She wore a voluminous black robe that covered her entire body. A gust of wind blew past, lifting up the black robe and outlining her enchanting curves. It was clear that this was a tall woman. After a brief pause, a respectful voice sounded out from beneath the black robe. "I don't know who you are, but I do know that you and I might be able to cooperate." Qin Yu continued to sob. He looked at the black-robed person across from him with teary eyes. "Why should I believe you?" The black-robed person stretched out a fair and delicate hand. She spread open her fingers, revealing a dark red mark on her palm that seemed like a flame. Qin Yu wiped away his tears and earnestly looked at it. He muttered, "Two unlucky fellows meeting. Then let's give it a try." Half a month later, the Borjo Dafu finally received the Marquis's order to organize his troops and set off tomorrow. Qin Yu certainly didn't forget what his true goal in returning to the Western Frontier Border Army was. Thus, on the day that Li Sangdo was stripped of all his positions by an angel from the imperial capital and was escorted back to the imperial capital for trial, the loyal Marshal Marquis, Ning Qin, announced that he would go into seclusion once more. As for what he wanted to do, everyone knew. Wang De Tu was both excited and terrified because Master Ho had ordered him to choose 12 people to follow him. They were similar to the personal guards who returned to the imperial capital, but they were also very different. After all, they were going to enter the land of the berserkers this time, and there was no need for them to rely on such things. As for these people, apart from putting up a front, they didn't seem to have much use following Master Ho. Although he didn't understand, Wang Data didn't have any intention of shirking the responsibility. Looking at his old brothers, who all had rabbit eyes, he knew how envious they were. Wang San was naturally one of the 12. Although the army paid particular attention to ability, there was no lack of selfishness. Wang Dadu was not afraid that there would be people secretly scolding him for using his position for personal gain. This was just human nature. After all, there was nothing wrong with following Master Ho and becoming familiar with others. Just like the first time they entered the Berserkers' territory, the group of people that set off from the mine quietly disappeared into the border region. Zhou Dafu and the others were all experienced people in this world. They were completely safe and sound, so there wouldn't be any problems. As for the 12 personal guards that Master Ho brought with him, although the people in the smuggling team didn't understand, they didn't speak any nonsense. They had already made it clear that they wanted to follow Master Ho to make a living, so they knew how to be qualified dogs. That's right, the members of the smuggling team, from Zhou Dafu down, were all self-aware. If Wang Datu and the others in the border army in a mine were said to be country bumpkins that couldn't even be seen in public, then these people that specialized in smuggling were constantly sending goods into the Berserkers' territory. Those that sent large amounts of goods were truly struggling to survive in the mud, so they were even more lowly. They said that smuggling was to seize the resources of the Berserkers so that they could play a more effective role in the future war. That's right, they might be of some help, but the essence of it was to fatten up those great figures of the empire. They didn't have any extravagant hopes that they could truly become subordinates of Master Ho. As long as they could receive protection and become dogs that wouldn't be slaughtered at will, that was already enough. This caused Wang Datu and the others, who originally feared these smugglers who lived on the edge of a knife and were rumored to be cruel and ruthless, to discover that Zhou Dafu and the others were even more humble than they were. Both sides were in harmony with each other. As for the reason, Wang Datu and the others believed that it was because their master Ho's fame had awed this group of smugglers. Otherwise, they were nothing but country bumpkins, small characters that weren't worth the master Ho's attention. Thus, while they were proud in their hearts, they also felt increasingly tormented. Every day on the road, they would desperately temper their mortal bodies and increase their cultivation. But the reality was that their talent was ordinary and their cultivation methods were also ordinary. If they wanted their strength to rise in a short period of time, that was nothing but the ravings of a fool. Within the carriage, Qin opened his eyes from his cultivation. He let out a deep breath, a sharp light surging in his eyes. He could feel the increasingly tyrannical strength in his body. He was extremely satisfied and couldn't help but smile. Raising his head, he saw that little Misty was looking out the window. Two strange-looking trees had been taken out at some point in time, and they were serving them respectfully and obsequiously. Seeing Qin wake up, a branch was quietly placed in front of him. Without hesitation, he reached out and plucked the wine fruit. Compared to the debt he owed from before, eating and drinking wasn't anything at all. He opened it and drank a mouthful. The taste was just as invincible as before. Qin wiped the corner of his mouth. He followed little Misty's gaze and said, "I still don't understand. Why did you bring Wang Datu and the others?" Little Misty didn't turn around. "Is it my problem that you can't understand?" She glanced at him and pointed at the wine fruit. "You owe me another sum. I'll note it down." Qin lips twitched. Although he was already mentally prepared for this, it still felt a bit strange to have a sum added to the bill so directly. Whatever. Since little Misty didn't want to say it, he would let her do as she pleased. In any case, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Regarding this, Qin could be sure of it. After drinking the wine fruit, he waited for a while longer. Seeing that little Misty didn't give any orders or that the chefs had any intention of cooking, Qin licked his lips and closed his eyes to continue cultivating. It had to be said that his efficiency was much better than before. He had a freeload. Even if he knew that this would be recorded in the ledger, he absolutely couldn't miss out on any opportunity. Little Misty turned her head and continued to look out the window. Wang Datu and the other 12 border soldiers were riding on their horses, all of them sweating as they tempered their mortal bodies. She curled her lips, revealing a bit of disdain. She thought that if they continued to cultivate like this, even if another 1,000 years passed, they would still be trash that couldn't withstand a single blow. Several days later, on a certain night, little Misty's figure quietly left the carriage. Qin was still cultivating, so he didn't notice this at all. The smuggling cultivators that were on night watch all respectfully bowed as they saw little Misty, their expressions filled with respect. Most of them were people that had followed the barbarians once, so they knew that this madam in front of them was no ordinary character. Even Marquis Zhongwu had to give her sufficient respect when facing her. Little Misty didn't say a word. She arrived outside the tent of the 12 border soldiers. She glanced at them and then gently stepped forward. The ground shook in a small area, causing them to wake up. Wang Datu was startled. As he opened his eyes and saw little Misty, he quickly stood up and bowed. "Madam." Little Misty swept her eyes over them. She lightly said, "Starting from today, you will all change your cultivation methods." On the 10th day after entering the barbarian territory, they could be considered to have truly entered deep into the barbarian territory. The movements of the smuggling team had already been discovered by the barbarians. On this day, Qin frowned. He awoke from his cultivation state and looked at little Misty. She was looking out the window, her eyes falling on the distant wilderness. A faint and cold aura was being released from her body. "What happened?" Little Misty turned around and lightly said, "Someone is locked onto us. It's a powerhouse of the barbarian tribe. They cultivate special concealment methods and have hidden themselves quite deeply." Qin sensed with rapt attention. A suppressive feeling immediately appeared in the great net of rules. Then, he locked onto the abnormality transmitted from somewhere in the net of rules. It seemed that the person Little Meaty spoke of was hiding there. Little Meaty glanced at Chinyu. Since he had the name Chinyu before, being able to sense the essence of the world wasn't anything at all. She wasn't surprised by this. "Do you want me to attack and kill him?" As she spoke, Little Meaty licked her lips. Chinyu thought for a moment and then shook his head. "Let's wait a bit longer. I feel that something isn't right." When they left the barbarian tribe, this shouldn't have been the case. Could it be that another accident had occurred? At this time, Little Meaty's eyes flashed. She suddenly said, "It looks like there's no need to do anything." Chinyu immediately sensed that someone was rapidly approaching the team. Looking at Little Meaty's expression, there shouldn't be any threat. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, the figure of the ascetic cultivator Prajna fell in front of the team. Chinyu's thoughts stirred. He turned to look at the team and saw the 12 border army soldiers. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. And at this time, Zhou Dafu had already come out with a smile on his face. He respectfully bowed and said, "Greetings, Grandmaster Prajna. We meet again." Just now, that uneasy feeling disappeared along with it. Prajna glanced at the border army soldiers that had become ordinary again. Then, she looked away and bowed with a smile. "I have come to greet the general." The carriage came to a stop. Then, the door opened from the inside, and Chinyu stepped out. He cupped his hands together and said, "Grandmaster Prajna." "General, shall we take a walk?" "All right." Chinyu jumped off the carriage. He ordered them to stay where they were, and then left with Prajna. And from his senses, he could sense that the abnormal area of the net of rules had already disappeared. It was clear that the person monitoring them had seen Prajna arrive and had retreated on his own initiative. Chinyu's eyes flashed. He slowly said, "Grandmaster Prajna, why have you come here to greet us?" Prajna revealed a smile. "The barbarians are hospitable and hospitable. This is something that the general should know." He paused and bowed slightly. "Now, I should call you Lord Marquis. Lord Marquis's promotion is truly worthy of celebration." Chinyu shook his head. "It looks like the trouble isn't small. Not only did you have to run all the way here, but you aren't willing to tell the truth." He lifted a hand and pointed somewhere in the distance. "Before you arrived, someone was already there. They have been monitoring us for a long time." Prajna was silent for a moment. Then she bitterly smiled. "I knew I couldn't hide it from Lord Marquis. Indeed, there is some trouble occurring within the barbarians." Following that, Prajna didn't conceal anything. She explained everything from beginning to end. The general summary was, there are different voices within the barbarians. They believe that the desolate human General Jinwu was helping the barbarian totem rise. There must be some sort of sinister plot involved, and they needed to thoroughly investigate it. Chinyu rubbed his nose. "Strictly speaking, these people aren't wrong. It seems that I didn't hide it well enough." Prajna slowly said, "Lord Marquis, rest assured that since I came here, I represent teacher's will. They cannot stir up any waves." Chinyu glanced at her. "Don't brag. If it was so easy, why would you need to personally make a trip here?" He took a deep breath and then let it out. "It's fine. If they want to thoroughly investigate, then let them investigate. I'm not afraid." Prajna's heart relaxed. She stopped and respectfully bowed to Chinyu. "Lord Marquis, rest assured that I will do my best to protect you." Chinyu laughed. "Then I'll have to trouble Grandmaster Prajna." Chapter 16:15. Afterwards, the feeling of being watched from afar appeared a few times. However, the other party was clearly afraid of Hanya's existence and did not act rashly. After more than 10 days, they entered the territory of the Green Willow tribe. As mentioned before, the next time they returned to the barbarian tribe, the desolate men would set up camp in the Green Willow tribe. As a person, unless it was absolutely necessary, it was a virtue to keep one's word. However, it was obvious that the atmosphere in the Green Willow tribe was not quite right. Outside the carriage, after politely declining Chin Yu's invitation, Hanya sat on the back of her horse. She frowned, a dignified look on her face. Soon, the ground started to rumble, and a black line appeared in the distance, charging straight towards the troop. It was a troop of barbarian cavalry. The team stopped and assumed a defensive stance. Grandmaster Bo re-glanced over, and his expression softened. It's the Green Willow tribe. The old chief was also among them. When he was still some distance away from the team, the Green Willow tribe's greenwood cavalryman had already stopped. He dismounted and quickly walked over, bowing respectfully. Green Willow tribe welcomes Marquis Zhongwu. Welcome, Marquis. Although the rest of the cavalrymen did not dismount, they all bowed and beat their chests, showing enough respect. The car door opened, and Chinyu stepped out. Patriarch, there is no need to be so polite. Please rise. The old chief stood up with a face full of smiles. After not seeing him for a short period of time, he actually looked much younger. His spirit and energy were flourishing to the extreme. The Marquis is a man of his words. Today, I will lead my men to personally escort you to the Green Willow tribe. Marquis, please take a seat in the carriage. There may be some bumps later. If Marquis trusts me, you don't have to worry about anything and just wait for us to arrive at my tribe. Chinyu hesitated for a moment. He said, Old Patriarch, there's no need to be like this. The Green Willow tribe has been plagued by abuses for a long time, and it will be difficult for them to return to their peak in a short period of time. If there is any inconvenience, then I can simply change stations. Marquis, the old chief roared and took 2 steps forward with his eyes wide open. Our Green Willow tribe doesn't care what other people say or think. If you hadn't saved us, I'm afraid that all the people in our tribe would have died. Therefore, the Marquis' camp can only belong to our Green Willow tribe. If anyone dares to object, ask our men in our tribe if they will agree. Ha! Ha! The Greenwood cavalrymen roared loudly, displaying their imposing manner and overflowing battle intent. Chinyu thought for a moment. He smiled and cupped his hands together. Then, I'll have to trouble the old patriarch. Without any hesitation, he turned around and returned to the carriage. Since the Green Willow tribe was willing to cooperate, what did he have to be afraid of? It was normal for there to be different voices within the Berserker tribe. Then, he would go and see just who was the one stirring up trouble. Hanya smiled and bowed. Patriarch, I will go with you and open a path for Marquis Zhongwu. The old clan chief smiled. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble you, Grandmaster. He respectfully bowed without the slightest bit of hesitation, because this was one of the reasons why he was so strong-willed. The Holy Land had been silent for many years and no longer interfered with the internal affairs of the barbarian tribes. Many people had probably forgotten the true terror of the Holy Land. The Greenwood cavalry turned their horses around, maintaining a steady speed as they slowly made their way to the tribe's camp. Their hooves stomped on the ground, creating a deep rumbling sound that was like thunder in the sky. A powerful aura swept out, causing everyone's eyes to turn sour. The feeling of being stared at appeared once more, becoming increasingly intense. It was clear that the other party's endurance had reached its limit. Finally, as the Green Willow tribe's camp came into view, the Greenwood cavalry leading the way slowly came to a stop. Loud shouts rose up one after another. The war horses could feel the tension and restlessness before a great battle. Their hooves constantly stomped on the ground, adding to the tense atmosphere. An army of barbarians had already set up a battle array, blocking off the path in front of them. The old clan chief rode his horse forwards, an angry expression on his face. Do not forget that this is still our Green Willow tribe's territory. If you stop us from returning to our camp, are you trying to provoke an endless war between us? He lifted a hand and roared out, My sons, hold on to your horses and raise the sabers in your hands. Use our blood and lives to defend the dignity of our Green Willow tribe. All those who block our way are your life and death enemies. Schwa, schwa, schwa. The sound of sabers being unsheathed instantly resounded through the world. Countless shining saber edges reflected a cold sheen in the sunlight. Across from the barbarian army, there was a sudden uproar. The several people at the front furrowed their eyebrows, anger in their eyes. Those old fogies of the Green Willow tribe were really like stones in a latrine pit, hard and smelly. If they joined forces, they certainly wouldn't fear a single Green Willow tribe that had barely escaped death and had yet to recover to its peak. But while they said this, they couldn't do it. Otherwise, if they really started a war, even if they could win, they would still have to pay a price. And more importantly, doing so would likely leave behind massive hidden dangers. They stubbornly held onto their suspicions of the forsaken humans. From the perspective of the barbarians, this was a good position, so the Holy Land maintained its silence. But once this line was crossed, for instance by triggering a civil war and the Holy Land interfering, they were still afraid. Hanya urged her horse forwards. Her calm voice, supported by her powerful cultivation, resounded through the world. Are you sure you want to use the sabers in your hands to kill an ascetic cultivator? And my teacher is the only great shaman of Meng Mountain in this vast world of Hung Mountain Black Temple. There was another violent uproar. The barbarian warriors' eyes were filled with fear as they faced the coalition army that had far more people. Great Shaman was the highest title of the barbarians, and the Black Temple that stood in the snow on Hung Mountain was the Holy Land in the hearts of all barbarians. Offending the Holy Land, killing the disciple of the Great Shaman of Meng Mountain, a noble and powerful ascetic cultivator. Just thinking about it made people feel fear. In front of the battle formation, the leaders of the tribes looked at each other. They all knew that starting a war was an outcome that none of them could accept. One of them immediately dismounted and stepped forward. He bowed with the barbarian etiquette and said respectfully, "Noble and powerful Great Master Hanya, we have no intention of offending you and your teacher, the Great Shaman of Meng Mountain. But the forsaken humans and us barbarians have a blood feud for generations. I suspect that Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin must have done something unspeakable and endangered all the barbarian tribes." He raised his head and spread his arms. "So the Black Tower, Chongshan, Yinhe, and Purple Forest tribes have formed an alliance to come here. I hope that Great Master Hanya can represent the Holy Land and give us a convincing answer. If the facts prove that Marquis Zhongwu is indeed an innocent person, our 4 divisions are willing to offer generous gifts to express our apologies and directly withdraw our troops from the Green Willow Division's encampment. Or else, even if we start a war, even if blood flows in rivers, even if we incite internal strife and slaughter among the berserkers, we will not back down." The patriarchs of the other 3 tribes stepped forward and bowed. "We ask Grandmaster Bori to represent the Holy Land and give us an answer. Otherwise, we will not back down." The atmosphere was heavy and gloomy. The eyes of the old chief of the Green Willow tribe were extremely cold. He raised his hand high in the air. The eyes of the young men became ruthless and bloodthirsty. Hanya suddenly sighed and stretched out her hand to stop him. "Tribe leader, we can't let the internal strife in the Brute tribe happen again. I will explain this matter to Marquis Zhongwu. I believe he will understand our choice." Behind him, a calm voice sounded. "I can understand." Qin Yu glanced at the 2 of them, indicating that they didn't need to worry. He stepped out of the battle array and faced the allied forces of the 4 tribes, his expression calm and unperturbed. "Your worries do indeed have a reason for existing. So, no matter what you are thinking in your hearts, I am willing to cooperate and give you a definite chance." He looked up at the 9 dazzling suns above his head. He narrowed his eyes and said, "So what do you want to do? Just say it." The patriarch of the Black Tower tribe was a tall and burly man wearing black armor. His eyes burst with a sharp light, and he gave a thumbs up. "Desolate Marquis Zhongwu, regardless of whether or not you truly harbor evil intentions towards my Berserker tribe, the choice you made today is a true man. I admire you." Qin Yu was expressionless. "I don't need it." The patriarch of the Black Tower tribe sneered. He flipped his hand and took out a wooden box with black fog lingering on its surface. He loudly said, "Inside is a heart-devouring bug refined by a powerful, fallen black sorcerer using his own life as the price. Grandmaster Hanya can test its use. Desolate Marquis Zhongwu, do you dare to make a blood oath that what you do after entering the Berserker territory will not harm the Berserkers? Qin Yu shook his head. I don't dare. He looked at the patriarch of the Black Tower tribe as if he were an idiot. I am the leader of a desolate smuggling team. I exchange for materials from you Berserkers. Although I cannot be sure what these materials will be used for in the future, a portion of them will definitely be used on the battlefield. Therefore, your words are completely meaningless. The Black Tower tribe patriarch was enraged. He clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. Good. As long as you make a blood oath that you won't harm the foundation of my Berserkers, you can do the same. Qin Yu turned and looked at Hanya. He didn't trust any of these barbarians, so he certainly had to inspect them. Of course, Qin Yu didn't dare to fully believe Hanya's inspection. So, when he turned around, he looked at his carriage. After several breaths of time, Meaty's voice sounded out in his mind. There is no problem. And at this time, Hanya had already received the wooden box that the Black Tower tribe patriarch offered her with both hands. After opening it, she slowly nodded. This is indeed a heart-devouring insect. It is an extremely high grade. Even after a great shaman uses it, it is impossible to lie to it. The Black Tower tribe patriarch looked up, his icy cold eyes locking on Qin Yu. Desolate Marquis Zhongwu, do you still dare to agree? Qin Yu had a calm expression. I will have to trouble Grandmaster Hanya to tell me how to use this heart-devouring insect. Hanya hesitated for a moment. She looked over. Qin Yu faintly smiled. He didn't speak any further. He walked over and whispered a few words, explaining the key points. In truth, the method to use it was extremely simple. After making a blood oath, he would take a drop of his blood and feed it to the heart-devouring insect. Qin Yu stretched out a finger, and a bead of blood appeared. He raised his hand and made an oath. If I have done anything to harm the foundation of the Berserkers since I entered the Berserkers, then I shall be rejected by the heavens and earth, and my body and soul shall be destroyed. The bead of blood trembled. This meant that under the witness of the heart-devouring insect, the blood oath had been completed. The wooden box opened on its own, and a strange cry came from within. The bead of blood soared into the box. Chapter 16:16. Hanya let out a sigh of relief. Although the fallen black sorcerers were a group of pitiful people that would be chased to death by ascetic cultivators, some of their methods were truly unimaginable. For instance, this heart-devouring insect in front of her. It was refined using the dark sorcerer's secret technique and was a strange object that didn't exist in this world. It was able to discern the tiniest ripples in one's heart. Although Marquis Loyal Marshal Ning Qin was the envoy of His Majesty the Barbarian Sovereign, he was still a desolate man. Luckily, the worst-case scenario hadn't occurred. After the heart-devouring insect swallowed the blood bead, it remained silent. This was the best evidence. The Green Willow tribe patriarch sneered. Now you still. His face stiffened and his voice came to an abrupt stop. He saw black energy suddenly rise up from the wooden box in front of Qin Yu. With a shrill howl, a fierce and ugly insect flew out from within. Its appearance could be seen as a cross between a centipede and a moth. There were countless legs under its abdomen, and its white body was covered with strange black lines. Its two wings flapped, and its icy cold eyes locked onto Qin Yu. A sharp light burst out from the Black Tower tribe patriarch's eyes. He roared out loud, "Desolate man Marquis, loyal marshal, you really are hiding evil intentions. Heart-devouring insect, quickly cut open his chest and enjoy your sacrifice." Blood oath, blood bead, heart-devouring insect, they were all related. After the blood bead was swallowed, it was the same as opening a back door for the heart-devouring insect. As long as the oath was false, it could ignore all attacks and defenses and directly eat the heart of the person who made the oath. The sound of flapping wings filled the air. The heart-devouring insect screeched and was about to rush out. But at this moment, Chini looked up at it. His eyes were indifferent and lofty, like a god sitting in a heavenly palace high above the highest heavens, looking down at the ants struggling to survive in the mud. The powerful suppression of the hierarchy caused endless fear to gush out, instantly crushing the heart-devouring insect. With a shrill scream, it exploded and died on the spot. The world fell silent, so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Countless barbarians stared at the scene in front of them with wide eyes. They had all heard of the horror of the fallen black sorcerers and a legendary heart-devouring insect. But who could tell them just what was going on? The heart-devouring parasite wanted to eat people's livers, but before it could do anything, it exploded first. What kind of operation was this? The Black Tower tribe patriarch angrily roared. He pointed a finger at Qin Yu and said, "Desolate Marquis Zhongwu, you were actually able to kill the heart-devouring insect. But even so, your true face has been exposed." Qin Yu remained expressionless. As for why the heart-devouring insect suddenly went berserk, I think you should be well aware of this. If I forcefully urged it to do something it shouldn't have done, then since the heart-devouring insect couldn't touch me, it would naturally blow itself up. Hanya's figure moved. She arrived next to the sticky liquid that splashed out after the heart-devouring insect exploded. She squatted down and touched it with her finger. She placed it next to her nose and sniffed it. Her face immediately darkened. Zhang Shuzi. He raised his head and looked at the four tribe chiefs. I will definitely investigate this matter. Just who did this in secret? The Holy Lands will not let this go so easily. The Black Tower tribe patriarch's complexion changed. Before he could speak, a barbarian woman walked out and respectfully bowed. Purple Forest tribe's flower Thorn greets Grandmaster Hanya. She stood up, a respectful expression on her face. My four tribes do not dare to question your judgment. The fact that Zhang Shuzi was able to cause the heart-devouring insect to go berserk is a secret of my Goliath tribe that very few people know about. Just who did something to the heart-devouring insect, and just what their goal was. I sincerely ask the Holy Lands to investigate this matter and find out who plotted it in secret so that no more incidents occur in the future. Henya glanced at her and nodded. Patriarch Flowerthorn, rest assured that I will investigate to the end. I will not let go of the mastermind. Flowerthorn smiled. That's good. She turned and looked at Chinyu. But just because the heart-devouring insect was tampered with doesn't mean that the desolate Marquis Zhongwu is innocent. In fact, I even suspect that this matter was a premeditated plot by the desolate race. Otherwise, how could they explain the heart-devouring insect exploding itself? In addition, they can stir up unrest within my Goliath tribe. Secondly, they can wash away all suspicions on themselves. After a brief pause, she bowed. He stood up and bowed, and his tone was incredibly respectful. That is why the four tribes still do not dare to trust him easily. Please understand, Master Ban Ruo. After all, our actions are all for the sake of the Berserker's safety, and it does not involve our own personal benefits. Hanya remained silent. Although it was a bit forced, she had to admit that Flowerthorn's words were reasonable. Although Hanya was well aware that she was lying, there were some things in the world that you couldn't ignore just because you could clearly see them. She came from Holy Land and was the disciple of a great shaman of Meng Mountain. To Hanya, this was an incomparably noble status and a powerful protective talisman. But from another perspective, it was also a shackle that made it so that he had to be careful in his actions to avoid damaging the Holy Land reputation. This was the case when he blocked the Green Willow tribe, and this was also the case when he was pressured by Flowerthorn. How laughable! The heart-devouring parasite is something you brought out. Now that there is a problem, you actually want to push the blame onto others. Chief Flowerthorn's words are shameless to the extreme. I truly admire you. The old chief of the Green Willow tribe coldly sneered. His eyes were ice cold. The truth is before you. I don't care how you argue, but Marquis Zhongwu has already fulfilled his promise. Since it is your problem, then get out of the way. He lifted his hand and waved it forward. Greenwood cavalry, Open the way for my Green Willow tribe's esteemed guest. Anyone who dares to block us will be my tribe's mortal enemy." Grandmaster Hanya was restricted by his status and had many restrictions on his actions. He would not be polite. The old chief could clearly see the situation in front of him. The four tribes were already prepared and would not give up so easily. Even if the heart-devouring parasite didn't explode and die, they would still have other excuses and wouldn't give up until Marquis Zhongwu died. Since that was the case, he might as well go straight to the point. Let's see if these people dared to start a war. Ha ha, ha ha. The Greenwood cavalry of the Green Willow tribe roared out. To them, for the allied forces of the four tribes to block their path in front of their tribe's camp was an extremely provocative matter. As for the disparity in strength between the two sides, in this world, there were only barbarian men who died in battle. There were no cowards who would bow and scrape for a living. Even if they died, they would drag a few of them down with them. Flower Thorn's complexion darkened. It wasn't because he had been mercilessly scolded and ridiculed. As a woman, she was able to sit firmly on the throne of the Purple Forest tribe's matriarch. She didn't lack any of these things, so it was easy for her to swallow her saliva. This old thing from the Green Willow tribe was indeed difficult to deal with. He had poked at their sore spot. It wasn't a big deal for the four tribes to join forces to suppress the Green Willow tribe and even surround their camp. But the internal strife of the barbarians was a sensitive topic for all barbarians. It was also the only rule that the Holy Land had abided by for many years. No one dared to touch it. Rumble, rumble. Across from them, the Green Willow tribe cavalry rushed forwards with a monstrous momentum. Chinyu frowned. He looked at them, and Meaty's voice echoed in his ears. How interesting. These barbarians seem to have a great backer behind them. Now that they've been forced into a dead end, they're ready to act for Rayal. Little Chinyu, you are the new barbarian sovereign, but now you have become the spark that ignites the internal strife of the barbarians. I fear that at least 100,000 barbarians will die because of this. How do you feel? Chinyu bitterly smiled and rubbed his temples. He didn't mind killing some of the barbarians who had ulterior motives. This didn't conflict with the barbarian bloodline mark he inherited. This was because the barbarian sovereign was an existence that ruled over the entire barbarian race. And since he ruled, there was also violence and suppression. Death was only a normal matter. But in his opinion, the people of Green Willow tribe didn't deserve to die. When he asked Meaty to save the Divine Willow and extend the vitality of the tribe, it wasn't because he wanted them to risk their lives for him and ruin their entire tribe. Chinyu stepped forwards. With a loud bang, the ground instantly collapsed, forming a massive pit. Waves of earth rose up, rushing in all directions. The barbarian army that was about to collide with Chinyu suddenly reined in their horses. The complexions of the four patriarchs changed. Their eyes fell on Chinyu, shock in their eyes. They never imagined that the desolate Marquis Zhongwu would have such a formidable cultivation. Chinyu lightly said, "The reason I entered the territory of the barbarians is to take what we need and benefit together. War is not what I want." He stepped forwards. "I have already taken a step back. Since you won't give up, then according to the customs of the barbarians, we will fight to see who is stronger. I have two subordinates. As long as I can defeat them, I will turn around and leave. In the future, I will never take half a step into the barbarians' territory. But what if you lose? I want one person." Chinyu lifted a hand and pointed at a thin barbarian beside the four patriarchs. This barbarian had his head lowered and was silent. "Hand him over to me and let me deal with him." After being pointed at by Chinyu, this barbarian remained motionless, maintaining his original posture. And sometimes, no change was often the greatest change. Before this, he looked like an ordinary barbarian. But now that he was silent, he seemed as immovable as a mountain. Towering and towering, he pierced into the clouds, making it hard to see him clearly. The Green Willow tribe patriarch frowned, a trace of gratitude in his eyes. He certainly knew that if Chinyu didn't intervene, then, after today, the Green Willow tribe would likely be erased from the barbarian tribe register. Since the four great tribes had moved, they would definitely cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, not leaving behind any hidden dangers. This was a simple matter. If he were in their shoes, he would have done the same. Henya walked to the side and respectfully bowed. I would like to express my thanks to the Marquis on behalf of the barbarian children who should have died in battle today. At this moment, the last bit of doubt in his heart vanished. The desolate Marquis Zhongwu was indeed the envoy chosen by His Majesty. As for why a desolate man was chosen, there must be another reason. Qin Yu smiled. He hasn't died, so there is no need to thank me. But I will have to trouble Grandmaster Hanya to be a witness for me, lest they continue to pester me after this matter. He narrowed his eyes. Otherwise, I will really become impatient. At that time, I hope Grandmaster won't blame me. The four tribes joined forces to threaten him. So what? Even if he didn't do anything, little Meaty alone could easily finish everything. The only problem was that she didn't like the taste and didn't have any chewiness. You are wrong. There's a good saying that if quality isn't enough, then quantity can make up for it. As long as you nod, I can do it for free. I definitely won't mind. Little Meaty's voice was calm, but Qin Yu swore that she was serious. Across from him, Hanya didn't know why, but a chill suddenly rose in her heart. She looked at Marquis Zhongwu and nodded. Marquis, please rest assured. She turned and walked towards the four allied forces, not worried about her own safety at all. He had already explained the matter of the shackles and protective talisman. Unless the four great tribes lost their minds, they wouldn't dare to touch him. Grandmaster Hanya, Flowerthorn, and the other patriarchs of the four tribes bowed together. The Goliath army behind them also lowered their heads in respect. Hanya said, no matter what decision you make in the end, do not forget your status as Goliaths. As for the Holy Land, we still have the ability to decide your fate. This was the first time he had placed a threat in the open. With Hanya's status, this sort of method was extremely crude. But it was also because of this that it proved that he was serious. The complexions of the four patriarchs changed. They bowed even lower. Grandmaster, what instructions do you have? Please speak. Hanya said, do you agree to the agreement that Marquis Zhongwu proposed? Or do you want to provoke a great war today? The Black Tower tribe patriarch hesitated for a moment. He didn't speak and looked up at Flowerthorn. It was clear that this Goliath woman was the true decision-maker of the four allied forces today. Covered by Hanya's gaze, Flowerthorn hesitated for a moment. Then, she respectfully bowed. We are willing to accept. At this moment, she felt an intense restlessness that forced her to lower her head. In truth, Flowerthorn's choice was correct. If she refused, Hanya would attack without hesitation and kill her on the spot. Chapter 16-17. Hanya straightened her palms and bowed. Her eyes were gentle and calm. Patriarch Huasii and everyone else, please use your tribe's totem to swear to the Holy Land. My teacher, great shaman of Meng Mountain, will be the witness of this oath. Flowerthorn took a deep breath. All right, the leaders of the Black Tower tribe, the Heavy Mountain tribe, and the Yin River tribe swore an oath at the same time. Hanya sensed that the vow had been fulfilled. He turned around and left. Qin Yu didn't turn around. Baiji Gosheng, one of the carriages in the procession, was pushed open from the inside. Baiji, who was wrapped in a white robe, walked out of the carriage with a cold look in her eyes. At the same time, a Li family disciple with a long sword on his back and a pale face appeared outside the battlefield where the two armies of the berserkers were locked in a stalemate. He coughed lightly as he walked over. Huasi's eyes flickered and he suddenly shouted, Desolate man, Zhongwu Marquis, according to the rules of the barbarian tribe, the battle will be decided by 2 wins out of 3. Qin Yu glanced at her. No need. As long as you could defeat either one of my 2 subordinates, consider my loss. Baiji walked in front of him and bowed in a slightly unfamiliar manner. Her eyes were calm. Gosheng smiled bitterly. He raised his head and looked at Marquis Zhongwu in front of him. I'm already half a cripple. Marquis, you seem to be very confident in me. Aren't you afraid of losing? Qinyu lightly said, If you lose, you will die. Gosheng frowned slightly and muttered, Looks like I really have to risk my life this time. Of the 4 allied armies, the first to go to battle was the barbarian that Qinyu called out. He looked like an ordinary young barbarian. His body was rather small and skinny in the tribe. But since the 4 tribe leaders had sent him to fight, they were naturally very confident. Qinyu narrowed his eyes. Leave him alive. Baiji nodded her head and walked forward. Her white robe fluttered in the wind, outlining her proud curves. The barbarian army of the 4 tribes suddenly burst into laughter. Countless eyes fell on her chest. Her footsteps were steady, and there was not the slightest hint of chaos in her steps. However, her eyes grew colder and colder, as if they could freeze the entire world. The young barbarian clearly felt the pressure. He frowned and suddenly took a step forward. He had to strike first to gain the upper hand. Bang! The ground shook violently, then shattered and split open as a huge stone puppet was summoned. Raising its head to the sky and roaring, the stone puppet's eyes surged with a dense blood-red color as it raised its foot and stomped down. Baiji raised her head and stopped in her tracks. The strong wind blew against her face, causing her robe to flutter, making her curves even more alluring. Up above, the sky darkened. The stone puppet's feet covered the entire sky. Shwa! A streak of sword light suddenly appeared like a white rainbow, piercing through the sun. It whistled through the air and slashed at the stone puppet. Baiji turned around and walked away. The huge stone puppet behind her was cut in half from the middle. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. It fell to the ground and shattered into pieces of huge stones. The young barbarian who had summoned the stone statue frowned and slowly said, Good sword technique. A line of blood appeared between his eyebrows. Then, just like the stone statue, his body was split in half. His internal organs were scattered all over the ground. Fresh blood flowed freely, and a pungent stench assaulted the nostrils. Marquis, this servant's sword can only kill and cannot spare his life. I asked for Marquis's forgiveness. Baiji didn't turn around. She respectfully bowed, clearly aware of all of this. Qinyu glanced at her and lightly said, You helped me win this round, so I won't blame you. But the madam might not. Speak. Baiji's body stiffened. Qinyu waved his hand, not giving her a chance to speak. Baiji took a deep breath and turned to walk towards the carriage. At this moment, she was still as slim and graceful as before. She was still a beauty that could make a man's mouth dry up with just a glance. But now, no one dared to reveal any profanity. Instead, their eyes were filled with endless fear and awe. The complexions of Flowerthorn and the other barbarian powerhouses changed. Anger and alarm filled their eyes. They never imagined that a maid under the command of the desolate Marquis Zhongwu would have such a terrifying cultivation. That sword strike was terrifying to the extreme. Even if they attacked, they might not be able to block it. The 3rd generation of the Li family, who had fallen to this point and had to work as a dog to survive, sighed. With such a pearl right in front of me, what should I do? He looked at Qinyu, a trace of bitterness on his face. Qinyu turned a blind eye to him. He repeated what he had just said, If you lose, you will die. Dogthorn sighed again. Can't you say it in other words? It's inauspicious to die when you die. He shook his head and strode forward. His pale face was filled with helplessness. Everyone on the other side, can you come up with a weak point and take the initiative to collide with my sword? I, Dog Leftover, owe you a big favor and will definitely repay you in the future. With Baiji attacking first, no one dared to underestimate this sickly man who seemed half dead and only had one breath left. The Black Tower Tribe patriarch took a deep breath. He clenched his teeth and said, I will do it myself. Flowerthorn narrowed his eyes. He didn't oppose. He is indeed seriously injured and can only strike once. Be careful. Don't lose your life. The Black Tower Tribe patriarch licked his lips. Don't worry. He walked forwards. With every step, his aura became stronger and stronger. With loud, crackling sounds, his flesh and bones began to explode. His entire body swelled up, and his exposed flesh and blood turned a metallic black. He diabolically grinned and stepped forwards. "Pretty boy, let me see just how fast your sword is." Dogthorn mumbled, "Pretty boy in my hometown, in a sense, this is a compliment." As he spoke, his feet suddenly moved. His whole body was like a weightless feather as he directly slid to the left. In the next moment, the ground beneath Dogthorn's feet was instantly smashed to pieces. Wild strength recklessly splashed out. The Black Tower tribe patriarch sneered again and again. "Aren't you desolate, man? Sword cultivators the best at killing people? Why do you only know how to run? It seems that pretty boys will always be pretty boys. They look good, but are useless. When we get to bed, will you also be the one to be stabbed?" Dogthorn was expressionless, and his face paled even more. He continued to dodge, drifting about like a shadow. No matter how punch after punch smashed the ground, he was always able to dodge by a hair's breadth. There was one thing that Flowerthorn had guessed correctly. His current state was not good, and he could only use 2 swords at most. But in reality, for Dogthorn, he could only use 1 sword, because once he used the second sword, he would immediately die. So he was waiting for his opponent to reveal a flaw. Only then would he be able to deliver a fatal blow and completely sever his life force. The Black Tower tribe patriarch cursed endlessly. He had already cursed several times. Although he seemed angry, the truth was that there was only coldness in the depths of his eyes. The sickly pretty boy was waiting for an opportunity to use his sword. He had already sensed this from the beginning of their fight, because he could feel a threatening aura coming from this pretty boy. It wasn't strong, but it was suffocating. It was like an ice blade that was as thin as a cicada's wing. Although it could be shattered with a casual flick, as long as one was fast enough, it could still easily cut open one's flesh and meridians, causing fatal injuries. The Black Tower tribe patriarch had already deliberately revealed a flaw several times. But whether it was because he was too cautious or because this pretty boy was too timid, he still hadn't attacked. This caused the Black Tower tribe patriarch to furrow his brows. In his current state, his defensive power was the strongest, but maintaining this state consumed a great deal of strength. The pretty boy in front of him seemed like he couldn't breathe and would die at any moment, but he was so slippery that he was able to avoid danger time and time again. If this continued, the Black Tower tribe patriarch would have no choice but to lower his defenses before he could kill Dogthorn with a single punch. Flowerthorn took a deep breath and bowed. "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Grandmaster Hanya, we will bid our farewells here." She turned and walked away. Tribe patriarchs High Mountain and Yinha followed behind with pale faces. After a moment of hesitation, the Black Tower tribe members didn't dare to act rashly. Chapter 16:18. The allied army of the 4 tribes retreated like a tide. The Greenwood cavalry let out heaven-shaking cheers, their cheers echoing through the skies. As Goshung walked in front of Chinyu, he looked at him, panting for breath. "Now, can I live?" Chinyu had no expression. "I can decide your death, but whether or not you can live, that is not up to me." Goshung was stunned. He gave a thumbs up. "You are fierce." His body was slightly bent as he walked towards the distant wilderness. He looked like a wounded lone wolf. But as they looked at his back, no one dared to underestimate him. Those familiar with the wilderness knew that a wounded lone wolf was truly terrifying. Before they died, they would not hesitate to pay any price to tear out their enemy's throat. Within the desolate troop, within a bright carriage, Baiji looked at the distant Goshung. She frowned, eagerness in her eyes. But in the end, she took a deep breath and suppressed her impulses. Pa! With a resounding slap, Baiji was knocked to the ground. And now, the space within the carriage was isolated from the outside world and could no longer be sensed. She covered her face and knelt in the carriage. "My lord, I didn't lie. My sword can only kill. I can't hold back." Meaty had no expression. "If it weren't for that, you would already be dead." She lifted a hand and slapped her again. Blood flowed out from the corners of Baiji's lips, but she didn't dare to wipe it away. She struggled to get up and kneel down. "Remember, everyone in this troop, whether they live or die, is decided by me. Even if it is just a dog, it is not something that you have the qualifications to deal with. Just now, you were lucky that you restrained yourself and didn't try to attack me, otherwise I would have killed you." Meaty's eyes were icy cold, and her expression was one of loathing. She kicked Baiji to the ground. "Remember what happened today. If there's a next time, I will personally pull out your head." Shwa, Meaty vanished from sight. Baiji spat out a mouthful of blood. She crawled up and curled up in a corner of the carriage. Her eyes were the only thing exposed in her white robes, but there wasn't the slightest bit of hatred in them. She stretched out her hand and gently stroked her swollen face. She muttered, "My lord, you will understand one day that everything I do is for your good. Even if I die, I will absolutely not let anyone hurt you, even if it's you." The group continued on their journey. When Xinyu returned to the carriage, he saw little Meaty carefully wiping her palms with a white gauze. When she saw him return, she glanced up and then lowered her head to continue wiping her palms. Xinyu sat down. He thought for a moment and slowly said, "The one that was killed by Baiji was a cultivator from that race." This was something he had already determined at first glance. Therefore, it was easy to guess the real backer of the Black Tower, the Heavy Mountain, the Yin River, and the Purple Forest tribes who dare to go against the will of the Holy Land. No wonder Hanya was so cautious. Everything could be explained now. As a race that could compete with the Western Desolate for the right to rule the broken world of the Southwest Desolate region, one could imagine their strength and foundation. After all, the Western barbarians were the biggest external threat to the Western Wasteland Empire at the moment. The enemy of an enemy could be a friend. This was a very simple matter. As for why that race would secretly provoke the four great tribes to act, it was likely because they had already realized Qin Yu's current delicate status in the Western Desolate. Disregarding that race that would inevitably infiltrate the Western Desolate, just in the imperial capital, there were countless people who hoped that Qin Yu would die. For instance, the Howie family. It wasn't hard to imagine that they would sell information about Qin Yu and even take the initiative to seek cooperation with that race. His exposure was also a matter of course. It was impossible for Baiji's sword to cut down that desolate person. She wouldn't have truly killed that cultivator from that race. At most, she would have severely wounded him. But she had ruined Qin Yu's plans. He originally wanted to capture this person and use him to make a fuss in the Western Desolate. After all, the four old claws of the Imperial Palace were currently hiding in the wilderness. They were protecting Qin Yu and also monitoring him. As long as they learned of the existence of that race, it would be able to intensify the conflicts between the Western Desolate and that race. Of course, Baiji's actions weren't without any benefits. At the very least, it prevented Qin Yu from having his identity seen through. After all, if he could lock onto that race's aura, who knew whether or not they also had a way to sense that something was wrong with him? Meaty said, "Baiji's sword can indeed only kill." She didn't deliberately not hold back. After a brief pause, she coldly sneered. "So, that is why she took the initiative to be the first to go out and kill. You didn't realize it yourself, so you can't blame her." Qin Yu nodded. He spoke of his own considerations. "I don't completely blame her. After all, it is likely that Baiji helped me. But the appearance of that race is something that I can use. Do you have a way to let the four old claws sense this?" Meaty shook her head. "They should be carrying a formidable concealing treasure from the Western Desolate Imperial Palace. It completely fuses with the world, and unless I release my aura, it will be difficult to find them in my current state." It would be difficult, but it wasn't impossible. But doing so would consume too much of Meaty's strength. In fact, breaking the seal she placed on herself wasn't worth it. Qin Yu let out a deep breath. "Since that's the case, I can only take things one step at a time. Since that race has taken action, they won't give up so easily. There will always be a chance in the future. Misty nodded. She threw away the white gauze in her hand. Flames appeared in the air, directly burning it to ashes. A look of loathing appeared in her eyes. Chinyu felt this was a bit strange, but his intuition told him not to ask too much. Following that, the journey was smooth. They entered the Green Willow tribe. The camp and everything they needed had already been prepared. After Chinyu stepped off the carriage, he exchanged greetings with Hanya and the old tribe leader. The two of them didn't stay for long. They said that the Marquis must have had a hard journey and that he should rest early. Then, they bid their farewells and left. It was clear that the Green Willow tribe had spent a great deal of time and effort in the construction of the camp. They had prepared a common residence for Chinyu in the western desolate imperial capital. Although it wasn't as extravagant as the residence in the mine, it was still exquisite and unconventional. As for the Green Willow tribe, they had likely obtained some news from the Golden Crow tribe. Within the Forsaken Mortal camp, they had left behind a large open space for the two large trees that served as servants. Misty was clearly satisfied with this arrangement. The two flattering trees jumped off the carriage and each chose a spot. Their roots drilled into the ground, and their bodies began to swell up. Just like before, Misty walked into the treehouse and leaned back in a comfortable chair. She rolled over and yawned, soon falling into a deep sleep. Chinyu looked from afar at the two busy, flattering trees. Then, he looked at the sleeping Misty in the treehouse, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He ordered everyone not to approach the treehouse. After sleeping for 3 days and 3 nights, Misty walked out with sleepy eyes. Chinyu sensed something. He stopped cultivating and left the residence, walking towards the two large trees. The first thing he said when he saw Misty was, "How are you now?" Misty looked at Chinyu and rubbed between her eyebrows. Then, she froze midway and slowly put her hand down. "I'm fine. I'm much better after sleeping." Seeing Chinyu remain silent, Misty curled her lips. "Even if I'm not fine, what can you do about it? Do you want me to eat the forsaken people below, or the barbarians of the Green Willow tribe?" Chinyu rubbed his nose, not speaking. Misty chuckled. "Men are just a bunch of liars. Whoever believes them will have bad luck." Chinyu helplessly said, "It's not good to overturn a boat full of people. In this world, although most men are bad, there will always be 1 or 2 that are good." As he spoke to her, he was interrupted. Misty sneered again and again. "If you dare to say it's you, I will drive you away right now. Don't even think about freeloading." Chinyu decisively shut his mouth. He reached out a hand and pulled at his lips, his eyes shining. On the way here, he had drunk several fruits and wine. But he really missed the cooking skills of the Root People chefs. From the time he returned to the imperial capital until now, he hadn't eaten a single bite. He couldn't think about it. His saliva was about to drip out. Misty rolled her eyes. She probably thought that Chinyu's future prospects were just like this. She waved her hand, and the Root People chefs immediately put forth 120% of their skills. A banquet table was quickly completed. Chinyu picked 3 fruits in a row. Just as he was reaching for the 4th, he was stopped by Misty's eyes. She frowned and said, "Do you want to die?" Chinyu immediately understood that his current limit was to drink 3 fruits at a time. TSK. He had improved quite a bit from before. It seemed that the increase in his boundary had brought about great changes. Yes, he had to hurry up and cultivate. He had to strive to take another step forward as soon as possible. At that time, he would be able to eat and drink even more. Misty's eyes nearly rolled back in her head. She was probably shocked by Chinyu's useless thoughts and was left speechless. But to the current Chinyu, these small matters were nothing more than a drizzle. They couldn't affect his appetite in the slightest. Just like before, Misty would occasionally take a bite of food. Most of the time, she would only take a fruit and slowly drink it. Chinyu didn't stand on ceremony with her. He ate with incomparably fragrant sounds. 1 mouthful of wine and 3 mouthfuls of food. He was as happy as an immortal. He was full. The taste wasn't too good, but Chinyu still drank the last mouthful of wine. Then he stood up shakily. "You rest well. I'll be leaving first." Little Ro let out a sound of acknowledgement with her eyes half closed. She leaned back on the soft couch, and naturally, there were nimble branches that quietly swept away the mess in front of her. She switched to a more comfortable position and lay down. She watched Sheen Yu's back as he left, her eyebrows subconsciously furrowed together. Just what is the problem? She closed her eyes and soon fell into a deep sleep. But after Meaty fell asleep, her perception of the world actually reached its strongest. But unfortunately, just like before, Meaty still couldn't feel anything wrong. It was like there was an invisible and incomparably thin gauze screen in front of her. It wasn't thick and light could pass through it, but it made everything in front of her blurry, making it impossible to see clearly. After the Desolate tribe entered the Green Willow tribe, the first thing they did was to make up for the supplies they owed. Although the barbarian tribes all expressed that they weren't in a hurry and even hinted that they could completely erase the debt, they only asked for Marquis Zhongwu's help. There was no other reason. Only the totem had advanced. There was no need to mention the Golden Crow tribe's totem, the Golden Crow. Every barbarian tribe powerhouse that went to the Golden Crow tribe to pay their respects would turn green with envy. Even the Green Willow tribe's totem, the Golden Crow, had nearly been struck to death by thunder tribulation in the past. All that was left was a single branch that was still alive. After extending its life force, it changed every day and its strength rose to an astonishing degree. It was said that even in its nascent state, the benefits it brought to the Green Willow tribe were nearly the same as when the totem was in perfect condition. It had to be known that the barbarian tribe's nascent state and adult state couldn't be compared at all. The difference in strength was several times or even dozens of times. In other words, the Green Willow tribe's totem had advanced. Perhaps it was a coincidence that the Golden Crow tribe's totem had entered the house and saved the Green Willow tribe's totem, or perhaps there was another reason. But now that both totems had advanced, was there any need to hesitate or doubt? Previously, the Black Tower, Chongshan, Yinha, and Zillion tribes had joined forces to threaten them, so no one dared to express their opinions. Now that they had retreated and the situation had stabilized, why didn't they hurry to ask for help? Were they waiting to be scolded by their own totem? It was said that some of the more powerful totem in some tribes had already given a death order to their chiefs. If they couldn't invite the desolate Marquis Zhongwu, they should immediately step down and retire. In short, the Green Willow tribe was extremely lively now. The old chief also experienced the pain and happiness that the chief of the Golden Crow tribe, Ku Tuo, felt. As long as they were brave enough, they could receive so many gifts that their hands would cramp. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.